Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. You are here with me. We have a fantastic show for you this morning. Ian Proud is going to be here at 7 o'clock. That's why I'm starting a little bit early to give him a little bit of time to get here. We're going to have Karen, I think it's called Kwiatkowski. She's going to join. We also have Dimitri Lascaris and, of course, KJ. No, this is his day. So, yeah, we're going to have a fantastic show for you today. Ian is a British diplomat, which in and of itself is just super interesting, right? I really want to dig into that with him in regards to his experiences in being a British diplomat in Russia, no less. So he's here, very prompt. I'm going to bring him on. We are joined with the man himself, Ian Proud. Ian Proud, he is a former British diplomat that was a member of the British Diplomatic Service from 1999 to 2023. From that time, he worked in Thailand, Afghanistan, and was an economic counselor in Moscow from 2014 to 2019. Now, this was the basis of a book that he wrote on his experiences in Moscow. It was called A Misfit in Moscow, How British Diplomacy in Russia Failed. Ian, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks, Jamal. How are you doing? Nice to meet you for the first time.
I know, right? So I am very happy to meet you. I have so many questions, especially since you've been on the inside of this blob of whatever they want to call it. So I'm very curious on your take on this stuff. What did it mean to be a British diplomat in Moscow? Like, what was the job function? What was the responsibilities?
Gosh, I had so many responsibilities, Jamal, to be honest. But my main responsibility was to sanction Russia, essentially. That's not the job I necessarily signed up to. The photograph of me in the background is with the former Prime Minister David Cameron after the G8 summit that Vladimir Putin attended. At that time, UK-Russia relations were in a better state. Obviously, that changed in February 2014 with events that we all know and understand about, with the coup in Kiev and everything that happened after that with sanctions. But sanctions became my sort of main function. And as you can imagine, in the context of the Ukraine crisis, living in Moscow as a British diplomat was quite tense from a work perspective. But actually, from a life perspective, it was a great place. I had family, very young children there at the time. And as a place to have family, it might seem odd, but it was actually a remarkably nice place to live.
I can imagine. I mean, it's a beautiful country, from my understanding. Everybody that is gone is giving me compliments. I'm sorry, I have a cold, so I'm a bit stuffy. Yeah, I was super curious about what your role was there in that context as a diplomat. So thank you for that. I want to show you a few pictures, and I want to get your take on this. So you have, this is Merz, German Chancellor, presiding over mass layoffs, 250,000. This is according to Reuters. If you go to another one, you have Germany falls back into recessionary territory for a second quarter. GDP revised down. If you go to another one, there's so many of these. You have Volkswagen that fell by 36% in that quarter, or in the last quarter. Merz came out and said we have structural economic crisis that they're effectively trying to deal with. We have two more. This one goes into about 17,000 jobs were cut. Mechanical engineering, more than 12,000 metallurgy. Chemical pharmaceutical industries were pretty much untouched. Overall, the number of jobs in the German industry decreased by about 114,000, 2.1% over the year. If we move over to the UK, well, and there's also the hilariousness of this one. Germany coming out saying, we can't afford our welfare system. You people need to accept less. You all need to accept less. And this one, Britain no longer a rich country after living standards plunge. Parts of the UK are now worse than the poorest regions in Slovenia and Lithuania. I show those because I have a hard time believing that the other parts of Europe are faring that much better in this case. And yet, they are adamant about giving $100 billion, potentially that's what Zelensky wants, to Ukraine. And to make it even worse, the US is openly bragging that we're getting a 10% markup on every weapon that Europe buys. Like, hey, if they're going to play it, we're going to fleece them for it. How does this work? Like, meaning, what is the average person? And maybe that's the wrong question. Let's go with this question first. Why are they so invested? Were they willing to effectively burn down their own economies in order to continue a war that is obviously lost?
Well, because admitting that it's lost amounts to an absolute massive failure of policy and imagination on their part. They've invested heavily since 2014 in pushing the agenda of NATO enlargement through Ukraine. Putin has consistently made it clear that that was a clear red line. For him, we've sanctioned Russia to the hilt, hoping that would make a difference. It hasn't made any difference. And given all the signs suggesting that this would happen, we nevertheless, pushed Ukraine into a war that it is losing at great expense, at a cost of $40 billion every single year since the war started. Wow. To European taxpayers. Ukraine's military takes up 67% of its government spending. That's 37% of GDP. Think about that, 37% of GDP on defense spending. That's 10 times more as a percentage of GDP than the US. Obviously, the US is the biggest kind of global spender, massive amounts of money. But the Europeans say, well, let's keep going. I mean, the Germans, you showed those photographs of Merz, massive economic challenges facing his country. He wants to increase defense spending to 5% of GDP, not by 2035, but by 2029, which is, that's 100 billion euros a year, of government spending. Well, God help any sort of a disabled person or personal benefits in Germany.
What are they thinking? Like, I'm fascinated by this question of what are Europeans thinking when they see this? They see all of these European leaders coming to the White House, humiliated by Trump. I mean, he's taken opportunities to humiliate them individually. The tariff deal was a complete capitulation. And he has all of them sitting at his desk where he's using these photo ops to show dominance that he's effectively exerting over the European leaders. The markup, 10% on weapons. And the US is bragging, we're not paying for anything. Europe is paying for it all. Europe is paying for it all. And you still get European leaders saying, we are going to put troops in Ukraine after the peace deal. Basically, we're going to feed Europeans to the Russians. What are people, just regular, random people, looking at a newspaper, looking at news, maybe on independent media? What are they thinking at this point?
Well, most people who read traditional media, mainstream media, will get a blizzard of state propaganda that we're winning, and if we just apply a bit more pressure and just give a bit more money to Ukraine, then eventually it will do the job. But it's kind of sensible people like you on alternative media sources who are actually exerting real curiosity and asking important questions about actually, why is this the right way to go? And very clearly it isn't. I think ordinary people, I mean, I come from people assume that I was some sort of toffee-nosed person because I was a British diplomat, but I come from a very working class background, and ordinary people I speak to are genuinely curious. They want to find out. They want kind of real information because they can't get that from mainstream media, and they need it.
Yeah, because this is disastrous. Are the European leaders really serious about putting troops in Ukraine? I mean, it is, from the Russian position, those troops will be targeted immediately because they have to be targeted immediately. Europe has to know that, meaning their nose in a camel's tent. The moment that you put 5,000 in, you basically have 100,000 in. So is Europe serious about sacrificing X number of thousand of their people for unclear ends? And I don't think the ends are all that unclear. But are they serious about this notion of putting troops in Europe or putting troops in Ukraine?
Well, I don't think they have the capabilities to do so. Russia apparently has 600,000 troops in Ukraine right now. The British Army is 73,000 people in total. That's all the cooks, all the people who drive the trucks, and a few people who actually shoot the guns. So we just don't have the number of troops to put on the ground, even if we wanted to. Germany has the biggest army, but it's still much smaller. The biggest army in European NATO is Turkey, and they don't want to get involved.
Yeah.
In this, we just don't have the troops, even if we wanted them. Our camel, Jamal, I'm afraid, is actually much smaller than people realize.
That's a rational argument. That's a rational argument. Western exceptionalism is not rational. Like, contrary to all belief, they believe seemingly that we are better, we're morally superior, and we need to keep this war going because we need to keep this war going, despite every evidence to the contrary that Ukraine is busted. You can see that there's articles out today that Kupiansk, Russia's made advances. Kupiansk, I think it's called Serbiansk, the farce, that Ukraine is effectively in a panic. Kramatorsk, Slamiansk is getting flanked. It's obvious that this is reaching a crisis point, and Europe keeps pushing. I mean, like, I want to get to Trump in a moment, but just from the European side of it, I guess what I'm asking is, they're pushing knowing full well that Ukraine is going to collapse at some point. They're not going to stop. But the Europeans don't seem to have a notion of stopping. It seems like they're more willing, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, to push this war to the point where Russia is forced to take all of Ukraine with the idea that they can have this kind of guerrilla war after the fact, meaning we can tie Russia up for a decade by making them choke on all of Ukraine. So no, we don't want to deal. We understand what's taking place on the ground, and we accept what's taking place on the ground. We would have preferred Ukraine to win, but they didn't. And so the next best option is for every last man, woman, child, elderly person, handicapped person, etc., that they put on the front line in a press gang to die, and Ukraine to fall, and Russia to have to, I don't know, mobilize 2 million men to somehow occupy all of Ukraine. Is that too cynical? I mean, because otherwise I don't understand this continuous push for a losing thing.
Well, I wish I could say that Europeans had any clarity of thought on it. One of the big drawbacks of the European architecture, if you like, is collective decision making. You've got these 27 countries plus the UK trying to decide something, and they just can't decide in a quick enough way. I liken it to a game of chess with 28 people playing against one person, Vladimir Putin, and talking about each of their moves for weeks ahead of the move, and then deciding to do something less advantageous. You just can't win a war by committee. I think that's the truth of it. In terms of Russia's aspirations, I think certainly Russia would happily keep going for another year and take the whole of Donetsk, which I think looks very achievable militarily. I'm sad to say, from where we're sitting today, progress is very slow, but I think 1 year could, enable them to kind of do the job in terms of Donetsk. I've never really seen that Russia wants to take the whole of the Ukraine. That'd be absolutely not in their interests. But the big question, going right to the top, that you helpfully pointed out, Jamal, is who's going to pay for this anyway? I mean, is Europe really going to pay 40 billion at least every year to fund an army that Ukraine is losing? It's very obviously madness, but people refuse to face up to the facts because they know their political skin is going to be hung out to dry. When this comes home, it's far better to settle now and then deal with the political consequences after, because you see reform rising in the UK, AfD in Germany, Marine Le Pen's party in France, and so on. The mainstream parties, could be completely destroyed if they carry on this route.
But they are carrying on.
They are.
Like, meaning what you're saying is absolutely true. The AfD surging, National Rally surging. I would tell you, though, a lot of people don't believe Europe is a democracy. Like, if you look at what happened to Romania, they effectively got rid of, Carlin Gorgescu, in something that seemed very shady. And even getting rid of Marie Le Pen, it seemed very shady. And it seemed like all of it was done in order to undermine candidates who would be more skeptical of the conflict. I've even heard German analysts say, hey, we have tools that can prevent the AfD from coming to power also. They put the AfD under police security, not security, skepticism. Yeah. So that's what I mean, right? Like, it seems that there is, I understand that this is war by committee, but it seems like everybody in the committee, with the exception of Hungary and Slovenia or Slovakia, want a different, are on the same page. And that same page is sanctions. Merch just came out and said, we passed 19 sanctions, or 18, but the 19th is going to cripple Russia. It's like, okay, dude, you're being a comedian right now. I'm saying Europe seems to be fundamentally on the same page. And the fact that there are, let's say, opposition parties in major countries that want something different don't seem to be changing their point of view or opinion. They seem to be going down this road. I guess I'm asking, are they going down this road? Because the thought is, meaning this is not basic politics or domestic politics. This is international politics in a sense of geopolitical
It is.
war. Yeah, we need to cripple Russia. We can't do it this path, so we do the other path.
Yeah. I mean, I think the need to cripple Russia has always been an underlying sort of driver, even if it hasn't always been stated. But in terms of the anti-democratic thing, I completely agree with you, Jamal. I think one of the consequences of war has been the ever centralization of power into an unelected elite in Brussels through the European Union institutions. They've gathered political and military power, upon themselves at the expense of member states, and that's actually why countries like Hungary now and Slovakia are speaking out, because they see their power being eroded. They see themselves being sucked into a war that they don't want to have any part of. You see Peter Szijjarto, the foreign minister of Hungary, whenever he tweets, he says, we don't want to be pulled into a war that we don't want to have any part of. But actually, these centralizing sort of tendencies of the Commission under Ursula von der Leyen, with this kind of completely, frankly, crazy foreign policy chief Kwiatkowski, in charge, are just kind of centralizing, which is making all of Europe less democratic, including the UK. And when you have a mainstream media that constantly pushes state propaganda, well, that is also anti-democratic, because people aren't getting real insight, real truth, and real thought and conversation about different approaches to this terrible war that Ukraine is losing.
Give me your take on this. Was that the actual point of the European Union, though? I mean, I know it started as this kind of trade cartel, but the thought of, I remember Angela Merkel, ever closer, this idea of we're going to create a currency. Once we create the currency, it's going to force us to get closer and closer and closer. Was that the ultimate point anyway?
For many people, it has been for a long time, ever closer union, because bureaucracies by their nature, they need power, to fuel themselves, and power for them is more powers, ever greater kind of union, greater political control over the decision making of states, but of course, the European Union isn't like the United States of America, where you have a very clearly laid out federal system. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's better than the system we have here. You have 27 countries that have radically different cultures, from each other, different political systems, different economic, systems. Countries want to make their own choices. They don't want to be governed by invisible elites, in Brussels, and that's what makes the European project so much different. But why it worked before this drive for ever closer union is because it focused principally on the economic, social, and cultural side, breaking down barriers between states, allowing people to move freely, work freely, set up businesses, trade, invest, and all that sort of thing. All very beneficial. European kids going to universities in different countries, learning languages. All of this is fantastic stuff, right? You want people to understand people of difference, however that difference is defined. Race, religion, color, sexuality, whatever it may be. Understanding people of difference was always core to the kind of European project. But once you try to create some sort of homogenous political whole out of radically different cultural and political systems in different countries of different sizes and different strengths, it's never going to work.
Yeah, good point. I'm curious on something else. I want to go to Moscow for a bit. Since you were there, I would imagine you've soaked in the culture and the thinking, and you've analyzed the stuff constantly. Your Substack page is fantastic. I advise people to check the Substack out. You write articles on these topics all the time. What are they thinking? And the reason why I'm asking this, they're having a meeting with Trump. The meeting goes well. Donald Trump immediately flips on a dime and takes on the Russian position of, we need a settlement, not a ceasefire, a settlement. I need them to fight. We need a settlement. This freaks out Europe. And they're like, we must talk to Trump immediately, thinking that the last person in the room is going to somehow change Donald Trump's point of view. They rush to the United States. Trump, according to the Financial Times, comes out right here. The U.S. told the Europeans it would help the coalition of the willing, quote unquote, in Ukraine, but the agreement can still be canceled. Quote, American officials told the European counterparts that Washington is ready to provide strategic enabling capabilities, quote unquote, whatever that means, including intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, command and control assets, as well as air defense systems to support any Ukrainian ground-led deployment. The U.S. offer depends on commitments from European capitals to deploy tens of thousands of troops if Ukraine, and according to officials, the agreement can still be canceled. So the U.S. is throwing out this bone of, hey, we'll provide air cover, we'll provide strategic data and information, we'll have your back if you go into Ukraine. What is Russia thinking at this point? That has always been a red line. Trump and the U.S. has to know it, and maybe they don't. But if you're Moscow, what is your appraisal?
If you're in Moscow, you're probably wondering what on earth they're thinking about, quite frankly. But the important thing is there going to be a peace deal, right? That's what people want more than anything else. A ceasefire just kicks down the road some very, very troublesome issues around a peace deal, including on obviously the disposition of territories, when the fighting stops. But for Russia, what's happening with sanctions? If there's a peace deal, Russia will want some certainty that there's a process for them to have sanctions relief over a period of time as certain milestones are met. When you just have a ceasefire, that kicks that can down the road. And in circumstances where Russia is winning on the battlefield, why would they agree to that? They want real commitments. NATO, Trump's been clear on that. That's a very, very helpful step on his part. The territorial issue is very, very problematic. Sanctions as well. But, the Russians have said they never, this whole war was fought to stop NATO expanding into Ukraine. Why we would think that actually, even after a peace deal that was acceptable to both sides, Russia would then think it was acceptable to station troops, within Ukraine is frankly, difficult to make sense of, not least because Ukraine has the biggest army in Europe now, not including Russia, of course, has almost 1 million personnel. I mean, that's, their army is bigger than the British army, the German army, the French army combined by about 3 times, actually. So why would they need our troops anyway? If they have a 1 million men and women, under arms, it's quite bizarre. It's the need to kind of do something helpful, which in fact is deeply unhelpful and just delays the point at which peace will break out.
Wait, just to be clear, you're saying you believe Ukraine is 1 million or 1 billion? I think you're
million. Sorry, million. Did I say billion? No, million.
Yeah. Is that true though? I mean, like all the reports that have been coming out, the 1.7 million dead that was leaked at one point. Let's say it's not 1.7, even 1.5. I used to go with 1.3, and 1.3 is still an astonishing number of people to be killed. 400,000 people, that's according to Ukraine itself, have effectively deserted. They have manpower shortages on the entirety of the front. That's why there's the breakthroughs that are taking place today. It doesn't seem like they got 1 million men left to fight that war, unless you mean conscripting kids and elderly.
Well, from the moment the war started, martial law was imposed and adult males were not allowed to leave the country. Now, okay, right. Some of them have smuggled their way across the country. Some of them have paid bribes to leave the country, and some of them have paid bribes not to be beaten up in the streets and mobilized if they have enough money. But all of the kind of fighting age men, and some will have frankly reached fighting age since the war started, has been going on so long, have not been able to leave the country. So they have a big pool, and if men don't want to fight, as you alluded earlier, they just get dragged off the streets, in front of their families, beaten, loaded into buses and taken to the front line, whether they like it or not. So yes, even if they've lost 1.7 to death and injury, by the way, I mean, some of them could still be recycled back into military service. I do believe they have approaching 1 million men. I mean, there's a huge front, across the battle line. Ukraine has actually defended it incredibly well, has to be said. I mean, all credit to them. Russian progress has been very slow. So, I mean, they're defending that with something, and that's very large numbers of troops that we, actually no Europe, less so America, but we are paying for.
Have you seen those videos? Oh, those videos are so bad. It's like a guy's walking this dog, truck comes up, grabs the guy, snatches him, and kicks the dog.
Yeah,
Or
it's
the
terrible.
pizza delivery driver. There are horrendous videos.
Can you imagine that happening in the USA? Where do you live, actually, Jamal? Which
I
part
am in
of the US?
Malaysia as we speak. I'm sorry,
Oh,
I'm in Indonesia as we speak. But I usually
very
live in
good.
Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah, I like Virginia very much, and also like Indonesia very much as well, actually. Been there many times. But actually, can you imagine that happening in Richmond, Virginia? You know,
It's hard
somebody
to kind of wrap
dragging
your head
college
around.
kids off. I can't imagine it in the UK. There'd be public uproar about it. You know, it'd be all over the newspapers. You never hear anything about this in British mainstream media, and I suspect not
Really?
in US mainstream media either. And yet the
So they
videos, as you
buried
say, are utterly horrendous.
they bury these videos in the UK. I mean, no, I don't see. I haven't been in the States in a while, but yeah, when I was there, I haven't seen these videos. People typically see them on social media. Yeah, I mean, you see people fighting tooth and nail, believing that this is a death sentence if you effectively take me to the front lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I asked Kwok what about to write a report on busification, you know, just out of interest, and it sent me something back about the renovation of old buses. You know, so even Kwok on X was censoring, you know, this. It's updated it now, but and then it said Buddhification, like so people taking up Buddhism at one point as well. So I mean, even
that's great.
X is better now, but yeah. It's amazing the kind of complete suffocation of any open information about busification is a terrible, terrible thing and shouldn't be allowed to happen. We wouldn't allow that to happen in our countries.
Do you think Trump is serious about peace?
I do, actually. I do. But I think he's hemmed in. I think he's hemmed in by the blob, his own blob. He's hemmed in by our blobs, and we have lots of blobs. And you know, I think he wants to cut a deal with Putin. I think he actually wants to cut a deal that saves lives in Ukraine, but he just can't make all these restive parts kind of come together. You know, it's the big irony, Jamal, of this is that actually, you know, this war started because, you know, the Americans under Biden were pushing it with the Europeans kind of reluctant partners. But now that's flipped. That's the Europeans who want to keep fighting, and the Americans are saying, well, actually, no, shouldn't we stop? I mean, it's quite a bizarre reversal that we've seen happening. I can't quite get my head around it.
But Trump could always walk. And the reason that the Europeans, if you remember, after the meeting with Putin, the Europeans were very angry. They were hostile. Oh, we're not going to accept this. They brought in Zelensky, rubbed his head, said, it's okay, it's okay. Daddy is treating you poorly. We're going to go see Daddy together because we don't want Daddy to abuse you like he did last time. Zelensky put on a suit. Apparently, J.D. Vance said, you need to, if you calm down, I won't say anything. And so you had to mute it, Zelensky. You know, anger that was there, muted into very calm beseeching of Daddy to please, daddies, don't leave us. Don't go to this other woman. And in that very specific case, meaning they know in their heart of hearts that Trump could always walk. And so they're not going after him in a particular way because they don't necessarily want him to say, I'm done, hands up, I'm walking out the door. Why doesn't Trump walks if the U.S. pulls out all of the stops? Meaning, and I guess I'm asking this question, just to be clear. I'm asking this question because if Trump is serious, the Nets is out. This other stuff is not.
Well, he's not walking because the Americans are making lots of money, and he's even said so himself. You know, NATO is paying for the weapons, and that's not the US bit of NATO. That's the other bit of NATO. Actually, the only 1/3 of NATO, because bear in mind that the United States of America effectively makes up 2/3 of NATO. You know, all these Europeans are kind of paying for the war, so it's no longer his problem, and American companies are benefiting. So, I mean, I think he would like to see a way out, but he's not able to break the deadlock in Europe, and ultimately he can see a profit in it as well. So the businessman in him is saying, well, okay, well, this is not the route that I would prefer, but okay, if we're making money, so why not? That's the kind of cynical way in which I tend to view it.
Yeah, but that means he doesn't want to stop the war. Like, meaning you can't have it both ways.
He doesn't want enough. He doesn't want it enough, because I think he could. I think he could seriously put the Europeans. I mean, he put the Europeans under pressure to kind of agreed 5% defense spending. You know, why can't he put them under sufficient pressure to kind of fall in line, Daddy? Daddy's talking over ending the war. He can't do it. So I think he doesn't want it enough.
So you think he wants it, but he wants it under certain terms.
Yeah, and and he has other big priorities. I mean, I think China's a bigger deal for him. He's got, I mean, like any president or prime minister or whatever, he's got domestic things to think about as well. The U.S. economy in the context of his tariff wars and that sort of thing. So it's just not really in the America's ballpark, and it just doesn't matter as much, as it's not as salient as, frankly, China, and never will be, and never should have been in the first place.
I know, but that also means that the U.S. can't pivot to China because the U.S. is still invested in Ukraine.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, it depends. And it also depends what you mean by pivot. Sorry?
You disagree? So, meaning from going all the way back to Obama, the U.S. has wanted to have this quote unquote Asian pivot.
Yeah.
They tried it with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Trump has tried to get Australia, South Korea, Japan, all of these countries online for a potential quote unquote war.
Yeah.
And the U.S. has wanted to extract itself, supposedly, according to Trump, out of Europe. Let Europe deal with the Russians. Give Israel to deal with Iran, with the U.S. dealing with China, using its proxies in the region to do so. I'm saying that the U.S. is acknowledging on some level that it can't fight all of these wars just by virtue of this kind of diversion or this diversification of responsibilities to its proxies. And so it doesn't seem to have the capability of saying we can supply weapons to every theater at once, and we can be in every theater at once. So it seems like he has to choose. I guess that's my point. It doesn't seem, based on what the United States has been doing with its proxies, that it has the capability of dealing with all theaters at one time, at least not now.
I think that's right. And actually, when we talk about Asian pivot, it can have different meanings. It can have meaning in terms of deterrence and containment of China. It can also mean embracing economic opportunities from China. It can mean both things, right? And I think actually you mentioned the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but that was set up to exclude China, in fact. So actually, if the US, economically, China and the US are direct competitors, although their economic models are very, very different. China has an exporting sort of economic model. The US has an investment-led sort of economic model. I know Trump wants to kind of shift that. He wants to kind of appeal to his blue-collar base. He wants to kind of export more US goods. That requires some significant shifts in the structure of the US economy, which will bring it up into greater kind of conflict with China. So, I mean, I think that trade and economic thing is a big part of the deal with the kind of the Asia pivot and making that work under Trump. It's not really clear that he's got a clear plan for how to do that sort of right now. But on your point about, yes, I mean, can US fight in Europe and China? Clearly it can't. But why would it want to anyway? I mean, the US isn't fighting in Ukraine now, and it never has been. And actually, Europeans are paying America for Ukraine to fight America's war, or at least Joe Biden's war. So I mean, if the US provides some AWACS planes for this apparent reassurance force, if it ever happens, it's not going to be a massive military investment on their part. It wouldn't diminish their capabilities, I don't think, in the Asia Pacific region. The US has by far the biggest and most powerful military in the whole world, and actually Trump's just given them a big pay rise as well. So I mean, I don't completely buy into that, but in any case, the US aren't invested in Ukraine now anyway, and never have been, apart from supplying weapons that other people are paying for.
Okay, fair enough. I'm just saying the U.S. policy at this point seems to be diversification of labor. And the U.S. wouldn't need to do that if it could be everywhere at once. I mean, you can have a huge military, and that military can get chewed up depending upon the war zone that you enable or put that military in. The U.S. in every war game has lost to China because, again, the U.S. is trying to attack, whereas China is effectively trying to defend.
And I guess Vietnam.
Maybe, yes, and Vietnam, North Korea. I mean, when this Korean War, that's another thing, right? You have these very poor fighters that are taking on this kind of U.S. military. I guess my thing is, if he indeed is trying to walk, and if he, in his heart of hearts, want to end the conflict, but he's not really doing anything in real terms to end the conflict, then how is he trying to end the conflict? Meaning, I know what Trump is saying. I get it, right? Oh, I should get the Nobel Peace Prize. You should nominate me. And he's getting other countries to say, this man is a man of peace. He's a great man.
He's
Give
the
him a
daddy.
prize. Right. But the reality seems very different. The reality seems that whatever Trump, quote unquote, wants, that American president can't accept capitulation, which is what Russia would accept. When they are given the document saying, this is what we need to end the war, that's effectively a surrender and capitulation document for all intents and purposes. Or do you agree with that? Do you think there was some kind of leeway that Russia could give while remaining true to the spirit of what they wanted in the context of the war? I mean, I think 2014 started it. The overthrow of Ukraine, but just in the context of them invading Ukraine and what they wanted. From my point of view, they were chasing safety. Can they get that in a deal?
Well, I mean, they were prepared to accept a deal in April of 2022 in Istanbul, which should have largely been on the same terms as that which is on the table now to Ukraine in terms of military neutrality, non-membership of NATO,
right,
and that sort of thing, and just accepting the line of control as it was frozen in place at the end of the hostilities and negotiating that over the longer term. I mean, that's a worse version of that is what's on the table now. But is it a capitulation? I mean, what's the alternative? If that is a capitulation, what is the alternative? The alternative is a much more catastrophic defeat. So when people talk about capitulation, what they're really saying is, well, we're too invested in fighting to stop. It's not really a capitulation. It's actually settling on terms which don't worsen their situation in the future. That's not capitulation. That's just statesmanship.
No, that's a good point. I guess the reason to call it a capitulation is because from the European and from the American side, there is a view of the world that seems to inhibit any capability of coming to any kind of terms or deal. Like, for example, I'm always curious about how Europe views its relationship with the US. From our perspective, Europe is not an equal. From our perspective. And so, like, I'm saying this poorly. When all of those European leaders came to the US, Donald Trump is being honest in the way that he sees them. It's that distinction. It's not, we're on the same side, we're buddies, we're friends, we're allies, et cetera, et cetera. Like, if you go to Russia and China consider themselves equals. And in India, they consider themselves equals. The BRICS thing, one of their main things is this is not about a hegemon. This is about equals working with one another in our kind of real politics. The US doesn't see the world in those terms. It's us and it's everybody else. And in the same way that Ukraine is being fed to Russia now, with all of these people getting killed in this catastrophe, the US is willing to do that to Europe, which is evidenced by what Donald Trump was effectively saying. Hey, if you put all those troops out there, we'll back you on it. We may not get involved, but we'll back you on it. Does Europe get that? I mean, do they know that? Really?
I think we tend to believe that if we just flattered Trump and we gruntled Trump along, that we can sort of buy ourselves a bit more time in this process. But I've always been very clear-eyed about our relationship with the United States of America. I mean, I love the US. I've been many times, DC, and including shortly before 9/11. In fact, I was in the Pentagon in Langley and other places around that time. A lot of time for the US, but it is a foreign country. When I visit the US, I love it, but it's a different country. Like if I travel to France, that's a different. I mean, US people may speak the same language as us, but it's a foreign country. We tend to think of it as the same as us. Our bigger sort of brother or daddy, maybe, who knows, whatever. But it's a totally different country with different national interests. Different drivers of its foreign policy, and we forget that at our peril, and we forget that sadly all of the time. But that is absolutely true. And since Trump has come to power, I mean, Vance, even before the elections, that Vance, I think, speaks a lot of sense, I have to say. I mean, I don't frankly care. I mean, I basically think the Democrats are essentially anti-British, but I don't really care who you vote as your leadership. But I think the kind of what the Trump team was saying actually resonated with me more than frankly anything that the sort of crazy sort of Biden team were frankly saying about the war, because they don't care. I mean, it's not their war. They're not fighting it. They're not going to send troops to it. They've never been prepared to send American troops. I mean, it's kind of they just had this kind of values-driven agenda to somehow peel these states off, make them more like us, make them mini-me versions of the US democratic an economic system. And it was totally misguided. And actually, it's not the Americans paying the price for that; it's us paying the price for that. And we can't see that the Americans have sold us down the river with this. And like I say, no disrespect to the USA, love it as a country, been many times.
No, you're just being true. That's just true. I have to be honest with you. I've been mystified on some level by it, which is why I end up with this kind of cynical thing of, okay, well, they want to drag Europe into some kind of war. It's and the reason I said mystified, like if you think of cut off gas, the U.S. turns around and say, hey, we'll sell you LNG for 5 times the price you're paying before. They still get Russian gas, but they have to buy it through a third party at a markup. The weapons that they're buying come from the U.S., which are expensive. All of this money is just leaving Europe and coming into U.S. coffers. And Europe doesn't seem to grasp you're being fleeced.
Yeah.
It's an economic thing on some level. Yeah, they want to go after Russia, but also they look at it as we can try to colonize Europe in the process of doing so. And those leaders are just, they're just going straight in. Do they believe in their heart of hearts, ultimately, though, that kind of like Israel, if we get into a fight, like every other world war, the U.S. will be dragged in. So even if we don't have the manpower to do it, we can pull the U.S. into a conflict.
Yeah, I believe many people do. I believe, and in fact, they talk about it all the time. Some sort of U.S. backstop, and that's why you mentioned it earlier. Trump's decision on strategic enablers and that sort of thing was important. We need that. We don't feel we can stand on our own feet, and it's ridiculous because actually Russia economically is, population-wise, is much smaller than Europe. Why can't we have a normal sort of relationship with that country? It's quite ridiculous. But that's sadly, that's that delusion, sadly, that kind of fuels our thinking that the daddy is going to come and help us if we fight the little kid, and it turns out he's tougher than we are. So I'm afraid to say, but that is the truth of it.
Last question: why do you think this level of ire is between Europe and Russia? I mean, you were there. You were working as a British diplomat. As you said, part of your job was sanctions. But like at some kind of deeper level, Russia's not a communist country anymore. So it's not like you're dealing with the Soviet Union or an ideological actor. You're dealing with a realist country. Yeah. Why the division? Is it just they have resources that we can get our hands on, so we need to undermine and destroy it? Is it historical context? What is the thing that is... You wrote the book on this, which is why I'm asking this as the last question.
I'll tell you one thing, Jamal. The whole time I was in Moscow, it was clear that the Russians wanted to have a closer relationship, with Europe, with the UK, as well. They wanted to have stronger economic, social, and cultural ties. What they didn't want is for us to kind of force our values. I don't actually believe there's this codified set of European values, but I mean, they didn't want European values imposed on them. They wanted everything else, opening up, having really good trading relations, having really good relations between people, cultural stuff, and all that. They were all in for that. They wanted that, but we didn't. And I think we kind of haven't really got past the downfall of the Soviet Union. This feeling that Russia was just a diminished version of its former kind of Soviet self, and we've tried to kind of diminish it even further, and we failed. And I think the reason why we, not me, but why many people hate that fact so much is because they failed. And actually, the only way out is to accept and admit to their populations that they fed all of this kind of propaganda to, that they have failed, and that will, politicians or humans, after all, have a cost to them in terms of their careers. And I think it's politics comes down to kind of simple sort of drivers of human nature. Politicians want to stay in office. They like power, and I think it's down to that. Coming out of the war in Ukraine means accepting failure, and that will have devastating political consequences for the mainstream elites within Europe. And I think it's as simple as that.
Interesting. See, I'm fascinated by this conversation, and I love it. By the way, thank you for it.
Let's do it again.
Yes. And so I'm going to let you go. I'm just going to say this last part. Many people come from a different angle. You've been behind the machinery, so you kind of see how these people act and why they act the way that they do. We're looking at it from above, Like, it's like you're looking at a plane trying to describe a plane and you can only see it from above. So it's an interesting conversation. Thank you for this, man. I really do appreciate it. I'm Ian Proud. Check him out.
Jamal,
It was
lovely talking to you. Let's do this again soon.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for this. You be safe, okay?
And you, mate. Bye for now.
Alrighty. Bye-bye. All right. He is fantastic. He had a 45-minute window, which is why I was trying to get through the questions that I wanted to ask him. But just so you guys know, Ian Proud, former British diplomat, was a member of the British Diplomatic Service from 1999 to 2023. From that time, he worked Thailand, Afghanistan, and as an economic counselor in Moscow from 2014 to 2019. Based on his experiences in Moscow, he wrote the book, A Misfit in Moscow, How British Diplomacy in Russia failed. I appreciate that conversation. I deeply appreciate that conversation. I will tell you why I deeply appreciate that conversation. As you know, I like points of view. And I like points of view because I think points of view give you a bit of context sometimes. Sometimes you can get lost in the wilderness, like where's the floor? He is looking at this from the perspective of somebody who's been behind the machinery, see how the machinery works, knows why people do what they do. Whereas we're looking at this from outside the machine, and we are attaching what we believe is the way the machine works, if that makes sense. Being inside the machine doesn't necessarily mean you know exactly how it works. You can, it's like if I'm looking at a table too closely, I can't necessarily see the entirety of the table. When I look at this very differently. Like for me, I guess I'm more cynical. Yes, these people have political careers, but I look at it in the sense of they have ultimate agendas beyond their political careers. It's a balancing act. Yes, I want to stay in office, but yes, I also want to accomplish these objectives. One of these objectives is diminish Russia. If we can get our hand on their resources, that is just fantastic for us. How can we do that? Oh, let's use Ukraine as a tool in order to do that. Now, you can say that this is the Rand report. That's true. How do we overextend Russia? Because that's effectively what they're doing. Now, again, my take would be, well, it seems like they're trying to feed Europe to the Russians, or at the very least feed Ukraine to the Russians, make them choke on Ukraine. Well, if you can't get a peace deal and you're the US president that don't push it through, and you're Europeans saying we want to keep the fight going, knowing full well that Ukraine military at some point will collapse, then what is that, right? Like, it's one thing if people came and said, you know what, this was gone too far. Too many people have lost their lives. We need to stop this. We need to come to a close on the. That's not what they're saying. They're saying the opposite. We need to keep fighting. We need to get security guarantees. We need to do all of this stuff. And the reality of it is, security guarantees are a tripwire. That's all they are. Do you trust Keir Starmer? Do you trust Merritz? Do you trust Kalis? Yes, she's beautiful, but she's dumb as a box of rocks and a sinister ass. Do you trust any of these people in real terms? And if these people really do believe that daddy will come to save them, that the U.S. ultimately will get dragged into any conflict if they sacrifice 15,000 troops that Russia would destroy, and they're up in arms, and the media is up in arms, and the media in the U.S. is up in arms, that a weak president like Trump won't give in? What I'm saying is a false flag in a situation with security guarantees will provoke a larger war that NATO, because of the security guarantees, will act as if it's an Article 5 and get involved. That's what I'm trying to point out. If they put troops in Ukraine, Russia kills those troops. What happens? What happens? So, no, but Ian comes at a different way. He's like, look, these people are politicians. They have a responsibility of staying in office. And if they F it up with some kind of agenda, they will get taken out of office. And so they need to stay in office. And so all things being equal, yeah, they may be going down this pathway, but at some point, reality asserts itself. I hope his point of view of it is more right. He has been behind the scenes, so maybe he knows better than I do. I grant that. But up to this point, there is a Western exceptionalism that seems to function in the minds of these political leaders. And even he pointed out, accepting a loss just seems to be off the table. And between accepting a loss versus allowing a bruised ego, which one wins? It seems accepting the loss is not the winner. It seems they just keep pushing. As long as you're having an argument, it makes it look like there's an argument when really one side is beating the devil out of the other side. So I hope you get my point. I deeply appreciate Ian for coming on the show. Yeah, I like that. I really like that conversation. I genuinely liked that conversation. I want to show something else that's taking place on the battlefield. Russia seems to be making breakthroughs in various areas. That is, no. I have to go here first. This raised my blood pressure. Take a look at this. This is U.S. envoy to Lebanon, Tom Barrack. He's talking to journalists. And I want you to hear what he says to these journalists as he's having this conversation with them.
All right, back down, please. Yes. Okay, if everyone could take their seats, we're going to ask Ambassador Barrack to come up.
Hey, everybody. No, I'm not going up there. No. Morgan, go. Hey, wait. Let's have one rule. Okay? You just had three of the most. Hello. Okay, wait. This we're going to have a different set of rules, right? Please be quiet for a moment. And I want to tell you something. The moment that this starts becoming chaotic, like animalistic, we're gone. So you want to know what's happening? Act civilized, act kind, act tolerant, because this is the problem with what's happening in the region. So I beg you, do you think this is fun for us? Do you think this is economically beneficial for Morgan and I to be here putting up with this insanity? In cadence, with your kindness, your interest, and your thoughtful questions, we'll give you responses. If that's not how you'd like to operate, we're gone. Okay? Is that acceptable to everybody? Now, what are we doing? I can't even have 2 minutes.
This clip is amazing. That clip is amazing. He is, and to give you a bit of context about what is taking place in Lebanon, the United States has been working with Israel in order to subvert and, frankly, throw the Lebanese government in chaos. The people, the president and the prime minister, has effectively worked with the U.S. to pass through a bill, or trying to pass through a bill, to disarm Hezbollah. Hezbollah has effectively told them to F off. We're not doing that. The majority of the country is like, F off. We don't even want them to do that, whether we like Hezbollah or not. So they're putting pressure on these guys effectively to do that, to create all of this political chaos. At the exact same time, the U.S. is working with the jihadist government in Syria, the ISIS president, and having those filthy animals to effectively line up with potential attacks on that same Lebanon. So while Israel is also attacking Lebanon during a ceasefire, and while the Wahhabi animals that the U.S. is basically backing in Syria are trying to attack Lebanon, they are creating political chaos. So you can imagine that the people are very angry, A, that the U.S. is backing a terrorist, genocidal state, Israel, as they murder dangerous babies, or Hamas babies, as they call them, or for that matter, even scare the hell out of school kids, and the bombings that have taken place, and the killings and the murders that they've committed, the theft of territory that they've been involved in, knowing full well that the U.S. has their back 100%. That trash, Tom Barrack, has the gall. He has the gall to go into a country after behaving in such a way and say that the people who are the victims are being animalistic, that this is the problem with the region. You're the problem with the region. It's you, you filthy trash. When Tom Barrack's head hits the floor, when his heart stops and he shits himself one last time, this planet will be 1 ounce brighter. It will gleam in space 1 ounce, whatever the increment of illumination is, brighter. That this trash is no longer part of this reality space. How on earth, just because you are wearing a suit, doesn't mean you're not undispensed trash? You are. And the idea of an animal, a filthy animal at that, calling other people animalistic. This is the problem with the region. As you set fire, kill, murder, maim, back at genocide in that region is breathtaking. It's just breathtaking. I don't even know the English or another word for it. It is rather astonishing. You would need poets sitting in a room coming up with something in order to try to describe the level of hypocrisy that is taking place in this moment. They're not being animalistic. They're being human beings. And as rational human beings, trying to get at what the chaos that you and your animals in Israel, your animals in Syria are creating. They're not the animals. They're being rational. You're the filthy animal in this situation. You have no right to go to people who are in the middle of chaos that you have created and call those people animalistic. That is outrageous. That is outrageous. I think he is being honest in the way that he sees it. And as I've always told you, I really do prefer to know the animal or the monster that I'm effectively dealing with. But they are not there to the benefit of Lebanon. He's like, hey, man, I mean, look, do you think it pays for me to be here? Do you think it's in my interest? Yeah, because you're there. The U.S. is not going to do anything that's outside of his interests. And the interest in this case is the destruction and complete subjugation of Lebanon to pacify it to the degree that Palestine or the West Bank is pacified. Lebanon, with Hezbollah, had the ability to respond. They don't have air defense, and the military is absurd. They won't fire a shot in anger. There's not an ounce of courage in the political leaders that are effectively there, either as the president or the prime minister. And so you have a captured state on some level that is not responding to the devastation that Israel is effectively causing in that state. That's what you have. That's why he's there. They're not the animals. They're being human beings in outrage. And you just don't like it. Man, when I'm trying to destroy your country, I don't understand why you guys are treating me this way. Why are you complaining with me trying to destroy and effectively destroy your country? What is your issue? And I'm not going to stay in here and listen to it. If you're going to yell at me, be civilized as I try to destroy your state. Be civilized as we're going to get all of these people killed. Be civilized as the Wahhabis attack your country. Be civilized as Israel bombs and murders your children and women. Just be calm. Trash. Barrack. This guy. Human excrement. Tom Barrack. What an outrageous clip. What an outrageous thing to say. Even if you thought that, which I would imagine many of the leaders that are coming from the U.S. think that, because after all, Western exceptionalism thinks is better, morally superior, and can tell other people and countries what to do. But see, therein lies the rub. That is not a strength, that's a weakness. That is the thing that makes you filth, not the other way around. The people who you are killing and destroying, you are literally backing the murder of women and children, with you then calling those babies dangerous because you had to come up with a justification for putting 20 bullets in a child. That's you. That's you. That's not them. That's you. You're doing that. You're backing that. Those are your policies. Policies, by the way, that you want to bring to Lebanon. Human excrement, Tom Barrack. Human excrement, Tom Barrack. Out effing rageous. Out effing rageous. I accept and appreciate your honesty, Tom. I appreciate your honesty. I hope you get cancer. And I hope it hurts. And I hope you linger for a decade with that painful bone cancer before you finally hit your head on the ground and drop dead. That is my fervent wish for you, Tom Barrack, and for everybody else that is effectively backing, pursuing, that genocide, and for that matter, has all of these negative intentions with what is taking place in the region. I will show you something else, by the way, something that Tom Barrack apparently backs. Israel, this is what the people Tom Barrack is working with is doing. Think of the trauma that these kids have. This is a school where Israel nearly murdered all of these children in a bombing near the school. This takes place every day, and it is a blessing, just a random bit of luck that these kids weren't murdered. And Israel would have turned around and said, well, they were dangerous children. That kid that had the blocks, that kid that was near the chair, he probably had a gun somewhere. That could have been your child. That could have been any of your kids. That could have been any of your kids. What do those kids think in this moment? Tell me that. What is on the mind of those children in this moment after experiencing something like that? Is that trauma? What do they think of the people who are bombing them? They know they're not ISIS. That school teacher is not ISIS. None of them are. And yet, they nearly lost their lives with their teacher not having any capability of doing anything in the situation, but huddling down and screaming and praying that they don't lose their life. Maniac, terrorist, genocidal government. That's who Tom Barrack backs. I mean, for F6, I can even show you this one. I mean, you've seen this video, but, let it sink in. Double tap. Israel bombs a hospital because the hospital has dangerous people apparently in the hospital. After spending months saying Israel doesn't bomb hospitals. After Israel bombs a hospital and you get rescue workers going to support and help.
لهذا الزميل الصحفي حسام المصري.
لا حصل الآن
نعم.
الآن خليك يا الله راح الدفاع المدني قتلوا الناس راح الدفاع المدني قتلوا الناس استهداف كبير الآن كما تشاهدون في هذه الصورة تدمير كبير قصف عنيف جدا
لهذا الزميل.
I got to be honest with you. I don't exactly want to get rid of Barrett in the chat. I want him to see it. I want him to own that. And everything that comes out of his mouth is just an enunciation of him backing genocidal, filthy maniacs that are effectively on a murder and kill spree, murdering innocent women and children, and yes, old men, etc., bombing and destroying hospitals. That is what he backs. Let him say whatever he wants. He has to own that and wear that badge. Now, he may not think that that badge is all that bad. That only gives you a sense of who he is as a person and as an individual. Let him own it. Let him wear that. Disgusting, filthy animal. That's what he is. And that's what the people who are effectively affecting this level of genocidal terror all throughout that region, not to mention the people in the countries that effectively supported it. That's on him. That's on them. That's on Tom Barrack. That's on Tom Barrack. Just utterly and entirely disgusting. Utterly and entirely disgusting. I look, I get it. He's a troll, and you don't like him as a troll. And oftentimes I'll put him in timeout. But he is a point of view, and he is a point of view that is espoused on Israeli media. He's a point of view that is effectively espoused all over the place in the halls of Washington and the halls of many locations. And to make that even worse, Israel came out, apologized for it. And after apologizing for it, it was like, yeah, we're sorry about that. We don't target civilians. We don't do those things. And you think to yourself, who are you telling this to? Who are you trying to convince? And I've come to the conclusion that they're not trying to convince anybody, that this is just mocking the victims at this point, because nobody believes their lies. Nobody at this point. Maybe Barack or whatever the hell his name is does. Nobody else does. You get the military then coming out upset. We are angry because you said this was an accident. This was not an accident. We intentionally murdered those journalists, and we intentionally attacked a hospital and emergency workers. That's what we did. So don't claim it was an accident. Think of the country that you have to be in where the government says, hey, it was a mistake, because they realize how bad it looks. And mind you, this is like 2 years after murdering women and children on social media everywhere that could be watched. Imagine how bad it looks that you've murdered all of these journalists and emergency workers, where you have to come on and say, oh, okay, we have done some horrible and disgusting things that we've covered the entire time. But this was an accident, and we will investigate. Trust us. Take our word for it. We're the most moral military on the planet. That's what we are. And then the military comes out and says, we take offense that you said it was a mistake. We intentionally murdered those people. That's what we did. We own it. We want to own it. It was our job. That's amazing. But that is the government that you're effectively dealing with. That is the government that Tom Barrack backs. That is the government that Barack backs. So when Tom comes out and claims that the people who he is getting killed are the animals, that is a magnificent, breathtaking, knockdown level of not just hypocrisy, but a complete denial of reality itself. It is amazing. It is amazing. Just outright amazing. I'll go to the chat real quick. Get rid of Barack S in the chat. Thank you. Again, I want him to own that shit for a while. Guy in a suit thinks he's civilized while killing babies. Yes. Think about that. I'm in a suit, so obviously I'm civilized, right? They put Jelani in a suit, head chopper, and does that civilize Jelani? Many people think so. He's going to be speaking at the United Nations. I just did a little head chopping in my youth. I wonder if he's going to bring that up. Oh, I would love to hear that conversation. I did a little head chopping in my youth, but I'm through that phase now, so I haven't chopped a head in a few years. That's what I want to hear. That's what I want to see take place. I will be fascinated by that. Absolutely, utterly fascinated by it. My guest is here. Excellent. Excellent. Because I didn't want to run that on my own for 45 minutes. My man, Dimitri Lascaris. How you doing, Dimitri? You doing all right?
I am so sorry for being late, Jamal. I'm on a journalistic venture right now, so that's I was delayed. My apologies.
You're perfectly fine. No, you're perfectly fine. I'm just glad that you're here. I would have had to do a lot of dancing for 50 minutes.
I'm sure you had a lot of good things to say, but
I had a good 10 minutes of things to say, but then it's like after that, it's like, okay, what's next? What's next? Yeah, man, like people don't get it. Like when you're doing your show, like, have you ever watched, and this is not what I want you on to talk about. In fact, I'm trying to turn over a new leaf, and I'm trying to write down questions in advance. Usually I have an idea in my head where I want to shoot for, but I'm trying to change and alter the show on some level, but this is not that. Have you ever watched Larry, I think it was Lawrence O'Donnell, where he was doing the show, he heard knocking in his ears, and he starts screaming, stop the knocking, and he's like flipping out. And he's like yelling at the people. He's like, I'll come down and stop the knocking myself. He's like losing his mind. And people would look at that clip and it was like, God, man, why is he acting like that? When you're doing a show, your focus is very narrow. And anything that interrupts that focus screws with you and leads to frustration. I've been in my house doing a show with my ex-wife where she's upset, making a lot of noise. And you're sitting there like, will you shut up? Will you shut the F up? Now, usually you wouldn't act that way, right? But it's like, I'm doing my job. You know, you're interrupting my job or you're interceding my job.
It's also problematic for the viewers. They get distracted too. So
Yeah,
it doesn't help anybody. I've had the same problem, Jamal. Drives me crazy, man. I go
times where
nuts.
I've had to dance for an hour. Sometimes you come up with good stuff because you get into a stream of thought where you're like, yeah, this is gold. I can do this. And there are other times where you're like, I got nothing. One day on the radio, I had there was one guest canceled first thing in the morning. So the entire hour I had to do it alone. One guest came in at the 8 o'clock hour. Then the next guest canceled at 9 o'clock. And so they were like back to back to back cancellations where you're trying to do the entire show. And I remember on the show, I was like, God damn. Like, this is outrageous. Like you out it to the audience because it's a weird situation. Dimitri, I'm glad.
And by the way, it was almost a total disaster for you, brother, because I only realized that I was late for your program because I happened to look at my email, and the reason why is because I'm driving down the southern coast of Cyprus today.
Are you
I'm doing a report right now on some fishing village I've never been in before, and I happened to check my email and I saw the StreamYard link and I went, "Oh my God! I forgot that I was supposed to be speaking to Jamal at 3 p.m. Local time today." So thank God I checked my email, man.
God
it would have been a total theft.
God got involved. Dimitri Lascaris, he is lawyer, journalist, intrepid reporter. Obviously, since you're doing that right now. Activist from Montreal, Quebec. In 2020, Dmitri ran for the leadership of the Green Party in Canada, and he hosts Reason to Resist. Dmitri, I want to show you something. I was very angry at this clip, and so I can imagine your take on this clip and I'll just play it because I'm trying to shut up and give the speaker more time. This is envoy to Lebanon, Tom Barrack. Listen to what he says here when he's talking to the reporters. And again, I want you to keep in context why he's there. They are destabilizing Lebanon in this moment when you have Wahhabists backed by the U.S., Israel backed by the U.S., all of which pecking at Lebanon simultaneously. Tom Barrack, responsible for it, and backs the genocide that's taking place next door. Listen to what he says.
All right. Please. Okay, if everyone could take their seats, we're going to.
Not going up. No. Wait. Let's have one rule, okay? You just had three of the most. Hello. Okay, wait. This we're going to have a different set of rules, right? Please be quiet for a moment. And I want to tell you something. The moment that this starts becoming chaotic, like animalistic, we're gone. So you want to know what's happening? Act civilized, act kind, act tolerant, because this is the problem with what's happening in the region. So I beg you, do you think this is fun for us? Do you think this is economically beneficial for Morgan and I to be here putting up with this insanity? In cadence, with your kindness, your interest, and your thoughtful questions, we'll give you responses. If that's not how you'd like to operate, we're gone. Okay? Is that acceptable to everybody? Now, what are we doing?
What an outrageous clip. That is outrageous. Give me your take, Dimitri.
Man, I don't even know where to begin, Jamal. I mean, first of all, I didn't see anything in that clip from the press corps that you don't see in scrums, as we call them in Canada,
Yep.
all the time, especially when, there are hotly disputed important issues being discussed by the press and some political representative. There was nothing unusual about that at all. Nothing. Secondly, he's like, we're not profiting from this. Is Tom Barrack serving in that capacity for free? I don't think so. My guess is that he's being paid handsomely by the U.S. government to do what he's doing. So for him to be suggesting that he's he's answering the questions from the media out of the kindness of his heart, and this is an act of charity, it's total, just complete and utter BS. But the most offensive thing about this of all, Jamal, and you've pointed to it already, is this man represents a regime, the Trump regime, that is participating in a genocide just a few hundred kilometers away from where this piece of garbage gave this press conference, okay, in Gaza and in the West Bank. Plus, if he just drives down the road, as I have done 5 times in the last 2 years, to southern Lebanon, he will see an entire series of communities that have been leveled to the ground, completely flattened by Israel using American munitions. So for this piece of trash to be lecturing the indigenous peoples of the region about civility, oh my God, what is worse in civility? Is it destroying somebody's home, flattening their communities, or is it raising your voice when you want to be heard because you have an important question to ask some political representative? I mean, this man is deranged, frankly. And as I said on X, after seeing this disgraceful episode, the man should be actually in jail. He should be frog marched off to the Hague and prosecuted for complicity in a genocide and in the war crimes of Israel in the south of Lebanon and in Beirut. That's where he should be. He has no business lecturing anybody about civility.
Agreed. And then to make this argument, that is the problem with the region. No, you're the problem with the region, Tom. You. The regime that you effectively back is the problem with the region. He's like, yeah, you guys are acting animalistic. Why are they acting, quote unquote, animalistic? Because they, as rational human beings, recognize what the U.S. is effectively trying to do. They're trying to create all sorts of political chaos in the government by pushing that government to accept a disarmament of Hezbollah, something that is not going to happen. And he's like, why are you guys acting this way? What's your issue? You're bombing, you're backing, you're giving this maniac government weapons. I showed this before you got here. Take a look at this. This is what Lebanon, and you've been to Lebanon plenty of times. This is what they're going through on a daily basis. And it's like, I don't understand why you guys are so animated about trying to ask me questions. Tom Baxter. And we
if Barrack had been there, I'm sure he would have chastised those children for behaving in an animalistic manner.
Yeah,
that's what he.
Why are you guys freaking out? Why don't you be calm? Just sit down and chill out and
lower your voices, man.
A rational conversation. That's outrageous. That's outrageous. That's what they're living through on a daily basis. What are those kids thinking in that moment? They don't understand the larger geopolitical consequences or the context of what's taking place. What they see is, we nearly died today. We nearly died, all of us. And if they would have died, nobody would have said a word short of their family and relatives. And Tom would have still sat there unimpressed, not given an S, just, you guys need to chill out. If you want to ask me questions, we need to talk rationally. Tom is backing that on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Does he get that?
Jamal, he kind of did us as in those of us who want to see an end to U.S. hegemony and the domination of this region. He kind of did us a favor, because he tore the mask off even further. He showed in the most offensive, obvious, unabashed manner the degree to which the people who speak on our behalf are depraved monsters and outright racists. And I think he isn't going to change people's attitudes in a way that will advance the agenda of the Trump administration. He basically has undermined the agenda of the Trump administration by, behaving in this outrageously racist manner. So, as I say, in a way, he did the resistance a favor.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I like to know my monsters. I don't want them to wear masks. So I appreciate honesty when I get it from their take of the world. That take tells you everything about them. It tells you nothing about the thing that they're talking about.
Yeah.
It's just, that is just a mind-blowing clip.
Yeah,
Like
I'm more concerned about a smooth talker, like somebody who comes in and comes across as being truly compassionate towards the local population, the indigenous peoples of the region, while at the same time fomenting, aiding, and abetting a genocide. That person's more dangerous. This clown, he has ignited a firestorm of controversy in Lebanon and beyond. And ultimately, that is going to create a problem for the Trump administration, and it already has plenty of problems in that region.
Is it, though? I mean, right now, you would think that trying to implement policy to disarm Hezbollah would create all sorts of chaos, since most of the local population, even if they disagree with Hezbollah, still want them armed because they understand it. Because the argument that the government is making is, we got guarantees that if Hezbollah disarms and Israel attacks us, then we can go to the UN Security Council and they will do something about the fact that Israel attacks us. How stupid can you be? And I don't believe for a moment that a country that has been bombed during a ceasefire is going to accept that nonsense. And yet, that's what the president is pushing, or the prime minister.
Yeah. Well, he's going to have a harder time making his case now, I can assure you. I mean, even people who might be hostile to Hezbollah are going to look at this and say, you're calling our journalists animals for behaving in ways that are no different from your own? Are you kidding me? And frankly, in my experience with journalists in Lebanon, they are much more committed to the truth than those in the Western corporate media. They were truly brave. As one of our mutual friends, for example, Fmr Lt, every time he goes to South Lebanon, he's risking his life. How many Western corporate journalists are doing that while at the same time casting aspersions on people of the region in West Asia? So I think he's really done a disservice to the Trump administration, which is a good thing. This is revealed or just added to the mountain of evidence about who these people really are. And by the way, I think that when it comes to disarming Hezbollah, it's my understanding that either today or tomorrow there's going to be, Hezbollah has called for a protest, for its supporters to come out and express their views about this demand that Hezbollah disarm. And Amal, the ally of Hezbollah, is also calling for that protest. So it'll be interesting to see how many people come out. But in this context, I just want to mention, Jamal, a poll that was done in May in Palestine. It wasn't Lebanon, but it was Palestine, because, of course, we've been hearing over and over again from Western governments and also from the Arab autocracies that are supported by Western governments that Hamas has to disarm.
Right. And
Palestinians living in the occupied territories were asked, what do you think about the demand that Hamas disarm? And something in the range of 80% were opposed. And Hamas does not enjoy that level of support amongst the population, not even close at this stage. I think it's a slight majority that supports Hamas across both occupied territories. But the percentage that thought that Hamas should not disarm was an overwhelming majority, because the people living every day with these monstrosities understand that their best protection is armed resistance. No one else is going to help them. No one else. So even people who are not necessarily aligned ideologically with the resistance groups are hotly opposed, many of them, to the issue of disarmament.
You make a damn good point. I mean, because what they know in their heart of hearts is that even if Hezbollah disarms, none of this changes. None of it changes. And so it's like, okay, do we disarm and they still do this? Or do we have armed resistance and they still do this? Okay, between those two things, which do you prefer? It's not a love necessarily for Hezbollah. I mean, for Hamas, maybe they do, maybe they don't. It's just a logical thing. And to make this point clear, so I'm pretty sure you saw the video where they bombed the hospital and murdered those emergency workers. Right here, just for reference for the audience, just in case the audience didn't see it. I did play this a little bit earlier, but I'll play it again just for context. Israel bombed the hospital. After they bombed the hospital, emergency workers go to try to give support, and they double tap, murdering the emergency workers.
لهذا الزميل الصحفي حسام المصري.
لا حصل الان
نعم.
خليك يا الله راح الدفاع المدني.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, this killed like 20 people, with 5 of which being journalists.
Yes.
Netanyahu, it was so bad, and it got so much publicity, probably because it was a Reuters journalist that died also. And just to show another point, you pointed this out on your channel about the number of journalists that have been killed in the world. I think it was like 71% of all the journalists that have been killed around the world have been in Palestine. 70% of journalists killed.
Since October 7th, 2023. That's correct.
Yep. That number is astonishing, which means that Israel is trying to hide the reality of what is taking place. They're in a war with reality itself. The people afterwards, after that took place, Netanyahu came out and says, hey, that was a mistake, which is amazing, right? You've been committing a genocide and starving like 2 million people for the entire time, but this one is particularly a mistake. The military gets angry, goes on to the news network and say it wasn't a mistake. We killed those people intentionally, and we're angry that you're saying that this was a mistake.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
What does one say? On the one hand, they're right to be angry, because if they were ordered to do this, and they almost certainly were, the higher ups are the buck stops with them. I mean, that doesn't alleviate them of responsibility. Okay, anybody who was involved in that double tap war crime, and there have been many by Israel, should be held accountable and spend the rest of his disgusting, putrid life, or hers, in a jail cell at The Hague. But the ones who are primarily responsible are the ones who gave the order at the top of the food chain. And so in that sense, they are correct to be angry. But I come back to this basic fundamental point, man. Somebody tells you, fire that missile at those journalists, fire that missile at the rescue workers who show up to save them if they can. You are accountable as well. You don't get a free pass just because, and it's very clear in international law, as a matter of international law and basic human morality. None of those soldiers, even if they were given an order, and even if denying that order or disobeying that order would subject them to imprisonment, they had a legal and moral obligation to say, no, I will not do it. And they didn't. So they too should hang.
This is Witkoff. Let's be very clear. Hamas has been willing to accept deal after deal after deal. Israel has changed one deal after the next in order to make sure that no one accepts a deal, because they want to effectively either exterminate the population or ethnically cleanse the population. They don't want a deal. That's the dirty truth. This was something that even came out from people working with Joe Biden, where they admitted that over and over again, Israel was effectively putting the kibosh on the deal. Witkoff, who apparently had some kind of agreement, is now saying that agreement is off, and Trump is aligning himself with Netanyahu. I'm going to play the clip. This is him on Fox News.
We'll have a negotiation if they want as to what next day it looks like in Gaza after this is all done, and what the definition of Hamas is. We can talk about those things, but we adamantly want, and I'm following the president's direction here when I say this, all of those hostages home.
This week, obviously, we had Israel killing journalists and rescue workers when this hospital was targeted. There were Hamas leaders there.
That's amazing what he just said. Like, this is U.S. media, right? Like, this is the issue. Out of the blue, it's clear that there were Hamas there. How the F does he know? How does he know? Who's telling him that? Mm-hmm. Where's he getting that information from? Brett Baer, asshole Brett Baer, who failed at his job right there. Obviously, since they murdered all of these journalists and all of those emergency workers, they were clearly Hamas there. What? And just slides it in as he's asking Witkoff questions.
Yeah. Well, the good news is this piece of trash is becoming increasingly isolated, Jamal, because I'll give you a couple of examples. I think it was a few days after the Israelis murdered Anas al-Sharif, the Al Jazeera journalist who was a Pulitzer Prize winner a few weeks ago. The New York Times, the fanatically pro-Israel New York Times, published an op-ed in which the writer explicitly accused Israel of assassinating a journalist. And then today, I subscribe to the Washington Post alerts just to keep apprised of what they're doing. And they put out an alert today in which they not only enumerated all the journalists, the total number of journalists that have been killed by Israel, and strongly intimated that this is an intentional project. But they also highlighted commentary from Israeli media personalities who were praising the double tap strike on Nasser Hospital. This is the Washington Post. So these scumbags at Fox News who are like just spewing this crap about there being Hamas people there are becoming very isolated, and soon they're even going to have to abandon Israel, in my opinion. Sooner or later they will. But whether or not they do, the fact of the matter is, even if there were Hamas personnel present at the hospital, I keep coming back to this stuff. I get sometimes chastised by people on my program because I talk about international law, and they say to me, "Oh, what does it matter? Nobody gives a damn about international law anymore," and so forth. I understand where they're coming from, but it actually does matter. It does matter. People do care about whether things are legal or illegal. Not all people, but a lot of people continue to care. And if we just abandon international law altogether and we say it doesn't matter, if we buy into the thinking of the elites, we're finished. We will be consumed by the law of the jungle. So it is illegal to do what they did, even if there were Hamas officials present at the hospital. And also, I should add, the claim that Anas al-Sharif was Hamas, that doesn't entitle them to kill Hamas al-Sharif. There's no evidence that he was, by the way. There's zero evidence that he was. The Pulitzer Prize winning journalist that they mercilessly massacred along with other Al Jazeera staff. But he's not a combatant. You can't kill somebody just because they're a member of a movement you don't like. He's not a combatant. There's no evidence he was a combatant. So again, Hamas has become this magic word in the minds of these sick lunatics that excuses every crime, every depravity. But as a matter of international law, even if what they're saying is true, and it isn't, it does not justify what they did. And also as a matter of basic morality, it does not justify what they did. So let's suppose there were Hamas officials present. You're telling me just as a matter of basic morality, you believe that they should have been entitled to massacre these journalists and also to massacre the rescue workers? Because there were some Hamas officials? I mean, what kind of a sick person thinks this way? So
American
yeah,
that's what it is. It's Western exceptionalism. They believe that they're superior, that they're better, that when they do stuff, it's okay. I give an example. If Hamas blew up an apartment building in order to get one Israeli general and killed 100 people to do it, under their logic, that's acceptable. Nobody else's logic thinks that that's okay. Under their logic, because this is the logic that Brett Baer is going with. This is the logic that the U.S. goes with. When they blew up that Houthi, I think it was apartment or something like that, and killed all of those people, there's like, well, we're trying to get one guy. Or they blew up the Jabalia camp, killing 60, 70 people. There were 2 people there that we believe that we needed to kill. I was like, that's, again, outrageous. They would never accept that on the other side. They would never accept that premise. Or they blew up a coffee shop because there was an Israeli soldier that was sitting there. It's like, yeah, but you killed 50 other people. Hey, we needed to get that one guy. They would never accept it. They would never accept it. I agree with you. I just so happen to be one of those people that believes this is the law of the jungle. International law doesn't exist. And the sooner the country realizes it, they need to respond to it. Why am I wrong?
Yeah. Well, you're right in the sense that it's not being enforced. And, a law that is not being enforced, one could argue, is a dead letter. I've said this myself many times. But if we capitulate to the notion that international law doesn't matter, we lose the moral high ground. We become like them. No, I don't want to lose the moral high ground. I'm going to insist upon, compliance with international law, even though I have little reason to believe that these psychopaths will actually comply with it, because I want, at the end of the day, people to understand that those of us who stand on the side of the Palestinian people, we believe in the rule of law. We believe in equality before the law. We believe in the enforcement of the law without discrimination, and we therefore occupy the moral high ground. There's value in that. There's value in that. As soon as we stop lending any credence, any importance to international law, then we lose the moral high ground, in my opinion, or at least to some degree, we diminish the value of what we're saying. We're not putting ourselves on their level necessarily. I'm not saying that, but we do diminish our moral standing.
Okay. Okay. I understand the point. If a hypothetical, you're in the business, somebody else is in the business. The federal government says, all right, you can get 5 of these items, but you can't get more because there's environmental damage associated with you getting whatever particular item that is, whatever widget it is. But there's a craving for that widget. You are in competition with somebody across the street. They get 6 illegally. You get 5 legally. How long is your business going to stay in effect in comparison to the other business that is selling more and is outperforming you? And does your morality in this case matter in a physical matter reality sense?
Okay. Well, you're talking about widgets. I'm talking about human lives. So I don't think that's a fair analogy, right? So like
I'm trying to make the point.
Yeah, I understand. You're putting yourself in I totally agree with you that when one party to a conflict says, I'm going to comply with the rules of war, and the other says, I don't give a damn about the rules of war, the ones who don't give a damn about the rules of war are going to have very significant advantages.
Yes.
That poses a real problem. I totally agree with you. And I am prepared to, as a commentator, as a lawyer, as just a human being, an activist, to make some accommodation for that to the resistance. Okay, I don't think the resistance should be held to the same standard as the oppressor.
Right.
No way. So I would give them more latitude, but I'm not prepared to go to the point of saying let's abandon all respect for the rules of the war on the side of the resistance. I still think we should make a good faith effort to comply with the rules of war, and and while understanding why resistance fighters sometimes depart from the rules of war and explaining that to our contemporaries, we should also urge them to make their best efforts to occupy the moral high ground, because at the end that will help them to win. They need public support, Jamal. They need public support, and they will lose public support if they descend to the depravity of their enemies.
Would Hamas ever get a good headline in the US or China or Russia?
Well, I've seen a lot of people. I mean, maybe not in the corporate media, people who have huge platforms, but I've seen a lot of people, commentators who do have significant influence, showing a lot more sympathy towards Hamas than they did before October 7th.
Yeah.
I've been absolutely blown away, frankly, by some of the commentary I've seen. I think people need to go further, and they need to say very, very unequivocally and bravely that all oppressed peoples have a right to armed resistance, and there's still not enough of that advocacy happening in the pro-Palestinian and the solidarity movement.
Yeah.
There's still not nearly enough. That's some of the things you and I know. I'm pretty sure you and I are on the same page about this. We do not tire of saying that the oppressed have a right to armed resistance, and there still needs to be more of that. But there has been, I think, quite a significant change in attitudes towards the resistance groups, not just Hamas, and to the whole notion of armed resistance.
I agree with you. I think that's true. I do think that's true. It's just, if I'm playing chess and a person has a knight that can move differently, they have an advantage. It's that part. And maybe the difference between 2 people who are at war is one person's values intellectually beyond the other person's values, who just don't have those values. Like, that sounds bad. That sounds hypocritical on some level, and maybe it is. But there is an aggressor in things. There is a imperialist that is built into the process. And I agree with you, resistance to the imperialists, that's a different standard. I don't know. I guess I would need a physical matter reality example to see. I get your point. Morality has value. It's just, what is that value if you lose? But yeah, I guess this is a different conversation depending upon the conflict that you're in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate. You point out, you said that you think there was an article that came out in the Washington Post, and they were pointing out that Israel was kind of losing this. It says Israel's unprecedented slaughter of journalists in Gaza. Okay, Washington Post now cares about it because we're talking about journalists, even though they didn't care about the other journalists. It says even as Palestinian authorities denied targeting Palestinian journalists, Israeli authorities, some potential or some prominent lead Israeli journalists and commentators have cheered these killings. I think this was the article that you were talking about.
That's right.
Where they agreed with the killings. Like, hey, good job murdering those journalists. And the Washington Post is like, ooh, that's impolite. That's impolite. What do you think keeps governments from getting involved? Let's say like China, Russia, because for all of the language that they put out, and I get it, I'm an American, and some people are going to scream at me, dude, it's your country that's doing it. I accept that. My country has gone rogue. And just like Germany went rogue, and you might have had some Germans who disagree with that process, that person had no capacity to do anything to corral that government from going rogue and on a murder spree. It took other countries to get involved to do it. What do you think is the restraint from Russia, China, India? Well, India actually agrees. They want to do that to Kashmir. But many of the countries of the world who have given voice of, we don't like this, we think this is inappropriate, this is obviously genocide, but they don't do anything. They still sell to Israel, they still work with them. Turkey still sells gas. And this is after, what's his name? So that Netanyahu was Hitler, and yet work with them to take down Syria and still allows the processing of gas through their pipelines. What is the restraint from your point of view?
Well, first, let me say that, in my opinion, there is only one government in the world today that is not blameless, and that's the government of Yemen.
Yeah.
Everybody else bears some responsibility. The Yemenis have gone above and beyond the call of duty. I mean, I'm sure that one day, and hopefully within my lifetime, historians will look back at this as one of the greatest acts of human solidarity in the history of humanity, what they're doing. But beyond the government of Yemen, even the government of the Islamic Republic, they haven't done as much as they could. They have the capacity to inflict devastating damage on the genocidal military of Israel. And I understand there's a heavy price that they will pay for doing this, a very, very heavy price, but they haven't gone as far as Yemen. They haven't made the sacrifices that the Yemenis have made. And I would also say Hezbollah has gone above and beyond, but they're not the government. They're one voice in the government. So just let's put that aside. I think everybody else deserves to some degree criticism. And although I do agree with you, Jamal, that the most blameworthy government is the United States, there is plenty of blame to go around. And that includes China and Russia. So I think, and India. And, I don't think the answer to your question is the same for every government.
Yeah.
In the case of Russia, we've talked about this a lot in our program. First of all, Russia is locked in an existential war with the West. And that's something that I think should weigh heavily in any reasonable person's mind. How much can they really put at risk for the people of Palestine under such circumstances? Also, although I'm not a big fan of this explanation, a lot of Israeli citizens are Russian. Personally, if I were Putin, I would say, well, you want to live over there and support a genocidal entity? We're going to take away your citizenship. We do not consider you to be citizens anymore. So I'm not really persuaded by that one, but it is nonetheless a factor which apparently weighs on Vladimir Putin. And, so those are considerations. With respect to China, I think that China, that's actually the one that I have the most difficulty understanding, to be completely honest about it, because I think China could cut off all trade with Israel. It is one of its biggest trading partners, either the first or second largest trading partner, and it wouldn't even be a pimple on the face of the Chinese economy, because the amount of trade that China is doing with Israel, relative to its whole international trade, is insignificant. But the amount of trade that Israel is doing with China from the perspective of Israel is very significant. So they could put a really significant spanking on the genocidal entity by imposing sanctions. I know they have this fidelity to this notion that there should be no sanctions without UN Security Council approval, but I do not agree with their argument as a matter of law, because the UN Charter is not the only instrument we have to consider here. They are also signatories to the Genocide Convention.
Right.
And they have an obligation under Article 1 of the Genocide Convention to prevent and punish genocide. And where the ICJ, which is the highest court under the United Nations Charter, the highest court has said that it is plausible that Israel is committing genocide. There's no question that all states' obligations to prevent genocide has been triggered just by virtue of that decision rendered in January of last year. And now things, of course, are much worse than they were in January of last year. So I think that China's legal argument is wrong. And I think they're smart enough to know that it's wrong. I don't know. I mean, that's the one country, at least they're not, as far as we know, arming Israel. They're not assisting, and they are taking the side of South Africa at the ICJ. And they've actually explicitly defended the right of the Palestinian people to armed resistance, which is not something that any Western government has done. So they're not even remotely close to the most complicit. But I have a lot of difficulty understanding the position of the Chinese government on this.
Yeah, somebody else has asked that question too. And I guess from my point of view, countries get involved when they're directly involved. Like, meaning it's not egalitarian. I think it was Caleb on yesterday, and Caleb was pointing out, was it Caleb? No. Dan Kovalik. Dan Kovalik was pointing out that this kind of socialist, what's the word I'm looking for? Idealist view of the world that's not the way they operate. That they're operating under a realist vision of the world. And in a realist vision of the world, that's bad, that sucks. We're not affected by it. And when you think of it in those terms, it does make sense. Why would anybody get involved if they don't feel like they're directly involved? In their case, we don't want to spend the money. We don't want to take the political risks. We don't want to take the political hit. We don't want to do X. We don't want to do Y. It's unpredictable in regards to the consequences. And so from their point of view, international law be damned about the whole, we have a compulsion to act. We will sit here like everybody else and just watch. That's dark, but I think that's true. Or do you think I'm being too cynical when I'm evaluating this?
Well, if I understand your perspective on this, all I will say is, although I struggle every day not to shed tears about what is happening, and I choking on my rage, I truly believe that this genocidal entity is heading towards disaster. It's just, I think Israel's finished. It's utterly finished. And it will be the author of its own destruction, but the resistance groups and civil society in the West are going to make a big contribution to it at the end of the day. These people are, they've lost their shit. I mean, things have gotten so bad for Israel, and it has become so self-destructive that even Erwin Kotler, I don't know if you know that name, but in Canada, Erwin Kotler is a former justice minister who's, probably the most prominent Zionist. And, his wife was a legislative assistant for Menachem Begin, and he's oftentimes described as the most important unofficial advisor to the Israeli government and blah, blah, blah. He signed a letter with Uber Zionist Stephen Bronfman, a billionaire, who is the chief fundraiser for the governing Liberal Party in Canada, in which he was condemning the Netanyahu government for what it's doing. Now, the whole tenor of their letter, it was called the London Initiative, and apparently there were thousands of people, many of whom have a lengthy history of supporting Israel, who signed that letter. The whole tenor of it was not, what are you doing to the Palestinians? This is a moral outrage. It was, you're destroying Israel's standing in the world. Okay, so let's just be very clear about that. It's not like they suddenly developed a conscience for Palestinians. They didn't. What they did do is they panicked. They were all panicking, and they were right to be panicking. Israel's going down, and the real question is, how many people are they going to kill before they finally collapse? That's what's, the horrifying. And they could kill many more, Jamal. Let's have no illusions about that. Man, they could kill far more than they've already killed before they finally collapse. Especially because every day they're being told, effectively by Western governments, they have total impunity. There is no crime for which they will be punished. So their behavior just gets worse and worse and worse. They could kill another 1 million Palestinians. They could kill another 2 million Palestinians. And it is incumbent upon us, every citizen of conscience, to stop this now. But whatever happens, whatever we can do in terms of stopping it now, they will collapse. They're finished. It's over. Israel will never recover from this. And I don't think this is optimism, or I'm not being Pollyannish. I just think this is just a straight up, hard, cold assessment of the evidence.
One of my audience members, Barack, he is very pro-Zionist and pro-genocide. And he would say, yeah, I hear that, but we've expanded into Syria. We're taking the West Bank. We're eliminating the Gazans and their dangerous babies. We are expanding into Lebanon. We're backed by a superpower. And with a wink and a nod, we're backed by all of the European powers. And nobody else has put sanctions on us in real terms. That doesn't look like failure. That looks like success.
Yeah, well, wars weren't won overnight. Look, the Russians are still getting killed. They're still fighting. They're 3.5 years. But if you look at the whole trajectory of that war, a rational person would say they're winning. But every day they're taking significant casualties. And their advances, although they're accelerating, they're not particularly rapid, even at this stage, 3.5 years into this bloody conflict. So, wars are not won overnight. And I think your friend is looking at only one side of the equation. He's looking at what Israel has done to its enemies. But at what cost? He's not taking into account the cost. The cost is its reputation has been demolished. It will not recover. And its backers, by the way, you're right. The United States and Western governments, these sick bastards, don't seem at all inclined to hold Israel accountable. But they're going down too, Jamal. They're going down too. Their economies are in rapid decline. None of them is doing what is necessary in order to strengthen their societies. Trump's making things worse. Starmer's making things worse. Merz, Macron, the clown who is our prime minister in Canada, Mark Carney, agreeing to hike, military spending to 5% of GDP. We can't afford that, man. He's going to bankrupt the country. The social inequality, the marginalization, the violence in the streets, substance abuse, all of these problems are going unaddressed. The declining, the deteriorating infrastructure, the healthcare system's going in decline in the West. So the backers of Israel are going to collapse. For that reason alone, Israel's finished. Because without their support, it's not that they won't, want to give support to Israel. They just won't be able to. That's where we're heading.
Oh, that's a good point. I mean, Israel is a pipsqueak of a country that can't exist the moment that the U.S. stops giving it money and support and weapons. It's that part. And if the U.S. goes down, and you make another really good point. When, what is his name? Peter Turchin, I believe. He has this book that goes into the elites where he is making this argument that elites, when they take over a country and it's too many, where they've been saturated, that they start to cannibalize the country. And so things like healthcare, education, all of these things effectively go dealt with in real terms with a public that's being immiserated, which creates and foments revolutions within the context of those governments. No, you make a really good point. From your mouth to God's ears, I think the issue, as you point out, they can murder a lot of people between now and then. And that is, I think, where the issue boils down to, which is a terrifying prospect, a very terrifying prospect.
I'll leave you with this. The Algerian people, before they achieved independence from France, they lost millions of people. Millions of people. The price of freedom is high, and it's highest in Palestine today.
Dimitri Lascaris. Dimitri, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Great conversation. I always appreciate these conversations. Dimitri Lascaris, you have a good one. Lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. In 2020, Dmitri ran for the Green Party leadership in Canada, and he hosts Reason to Resist. Dmitri, you be safe on your trip, man. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Oh, I cut him off. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I thought that was in. Yeah, Dmitri is great. He's a really good guest. And I deeply appreciate him for remembering to join me. Always appreciate people who remember to join me. Sometimes you don't have a backup in regards to what you're talking about. Dmitri is right. If the U.S. collapses, Israel goes up in smoke. It can't exist without America. I mean, maybe it takes so much land that they can expand into areas and all of this other stuff, but the reality of it is the balance of power is not there. If it wasn't for the U.S., there is no war with Iran. If it wasn't for the U.S., there is no war per se with Syria. And so how do they maintain themselves in a world without a superpower effectively backing them as a backstop to anything taking place? Part of the reason, I suppose, also that Russia, China, some of these other world powers don't get involved is because how far does the U.S. go to give Israel a backstop? And what does it mean when you get involved in what's potentially a conflict that may need to go kinetic, and you have the U.S. as a nuclear power, Israel as a nuclear power? Is that really a conflict you want to be involved in? So nuclear weapons, they matter. They definitely make a difference in regards to the capabilities of whatever particular state that is. Having the U.S. as a backstop makes a difference in regards to what the capabilities are of that state. We should not underestimate the level to which the U.S. will go to protect this colony. So it could be that. And as Dmitri was pointing out, he's pointing out this article in the Washington Post. Even Israeli authorities denied targeting Palestinian journalists. Some prominent Israeli journalists and commentators have cheered those killings. Great job murdering those Palestinian journalists. Great job. Look, I keep pointing out that Nazi Germany and Palestine, or let's say the Israelis, are not that greatly different. Germany built up an actual country, so there was that, meaning they actually had a powerhouse. They stood on their own. Israel doesn't stand on its own, but effectively LARPs as if it's a powerhouse. But the mendacity, the level of willingness to kill and murder, this drive, this insane lust to drink the blood of Palestinian babies. This is very Naziist in the way that it affects in the real world, in the way that it operates. You put fascists over giving power over a particular population that everything in them seems to hate. And I know they weren't born as babies hating, but at some point that has been indoctrinated into them, turning these populations into sociopaths that needs to be dealt with. How you deal with it, that is anybody's guess. And the idea that you let these lunatics loose on a population with the world just effectively watching, they do what they will. Rape with the majority of the population saying that's okay. Murder with the majority of the population saying that's okay. Massacre, starve with the majority of the population saying that's okay. What does it say about the population that is okay with that? What does it say about that population? The idea we have somebody in this chat that defends that is amazing. That is amazing. Personally, I always thought he was an asset. Because otherwise, why would you stay? Why would you stay? But I'm dodgy about kicking people out. I've always said that. But I could be pushed. So this is... Okay, I get to that with KJ. This is Russia talking about the battlefield. I disagree with Dimitri on what's taking place on the battlefield. They seem to be getting, if not routed, at the very least routed in certain regions. So Sputnik is covering what Ukrainian channels are saying, not even Russian channels. Now you can go to Slavyangrad and some of these other channels that are really good. Radovka, they often give battlefield assessments. Alexander Makaris, he's a legend. He's awesome. He used to come on our show on Sputnik. He knows the stuff. And he has a manner about him that is very endearing. It's like old style British. You know, it's like 1960s sipping tea, talking politics. He's very kind in a way that I am not. But whatever. This is a breakdown of what has been taking place on the battlefield, which is why I'm saying they're getting routed. Ukrainians are in panic mode as Russian troops are said to be advancing in Kupiansk and Serbiansk farce. Right here, here's one Ukrainian that wants more money because, like, hey man, times are tough. We're getting routed on the battlefield. They give me cash. It says, I don't know how it's possible. Here's how the Ukrainian netizen reminds how Ukrainian troops took back control of Kupiansk in the fall of 2022 and are now losing it again. He just, quote, shot, unquote. He's not receiving more donations during the Russian force advance. So the Russians are advancing in Kupiansk. Here's the other one. So what? Minus Kupiansk. The Oskal River coast, and then I think this is Izium. Another netizen got the perspective of Russian advance from the Kharkov region. It will be boiled in a cauldron, is the way the Ukrainian described it. Boiled in a cauldron. Posting the Ukrainian map of Russian advance in Kupiansk, Ukrainian units will end up in a cauldron. The user insight, whether Zelensky notices, is unknown. They would end up in a cauldron. They've been surrounded. Now, I've pointed out that it seems that many of the Russian advances that are taking place are putting some of the main battle areas, let's say Kramatorsk, Slaviansk, they're being flanked. And they're being flanked in a way that is going to cause all sorts of chaos in regards to Ukrainian lines. Meaning this notion that this is going very slow is starting to change. And I don't think people have realized yet that the speed and the pace of the advance is starting to change. I understand that it was said that they have 1 million men. There are 1 million men in reserve that could be dredged up and press gang into the military. That is not the same thing as fanatics who are willing to defend at the point of their lives. This is something different. Russia, in one sense, are dropping leaflets in the shape of money saying, hey, you can surrender, you'll be treated kindly, and all this other stuff, which many of them did, meaning the pace of the Ukrainians that are either moving into Belarus or, for that matter, surrendering has increased. This is on 1.7 million that have been killed. Let's say that number is high. Let's say it's 1.4. That's an astonishing number of people to lose. And you can see it as it's taking place on the battlefield with an inability to fill the gaps. The speed of the events is quickening. That's my point. And they are having somewhat of a difficult time trying to manage and maintain where things are. It was slow at one point, agreed. But this was military policy. We want to cut the losses of our own men, so we're not necessarily going to do anything that's going to advance the losses while trying to inflict casualties on the opposition. And at a certain point of inflicting casualties, well, you can imagine that you're losing people. At some point, those people are not going to be there to fill the gaps that you need to be filled. At which point, what happens when you can't fill a gap and yet you have a soldier making his way through that gap? Panic, chaos. That's what you have. So that is what is taking place on the Russian front. Donald Trump is in this conversation. Yes, I'm looking forward to this conversation with Karen. She is going to be on. Actually, she's supposed to be on now. I want to make sure she got the email. Give me 1 second. And we'll proceed from there. We have KJ at 9:30 either way. Yes. Thank you for that, Jeff, because I don't know how to fix it, so I appreciate it. Let's see. I know I sent her the email. Come on. All right. Let me send Karen one more email as a follow-up to make sure she received it. All right. So we will have to go without Karen in the meantime. God damn it, that is an interview I really wanted to have. I really wanted to have her on the show. All right, so I want to show you a clip from Lavrov. And I want to compare this to something else. And Donald Trump, as I pointed out, is a habitual liar. And as a rule, habitual liars lie. It is what they do. It is just the way they operate. My dad was a habitual liar. I've seen it up close. I've seen it in person. They will tell you whatever they need to tell you in the moment, and then they would do something completely different after the fact. Yeah, I'll pay for you to go on that trip. and then the person vanishes and disappears. And you see, everything going okay? Everything going okay? Really? You're really going to pay that, bro? Trump did that to the Europeans when he went to the Alaska summit with Putin and agreed on this notion of we need to end hostilities, not a ceasefire. This is what Lavrov said. This is what Lavrov said. And after I play what Lavrov said, I'm going to play what Trump told the Europeans recently. This is Lavrov having an interview. He was having multiple interviews, actually. But this was, I believe, last week.
First and foremost, genuinely wanted to achieve a comprehensive and lasting result that would be long-term, inherently stable, and truly reliable, quite unlike the European counterparts who at that particular time kept persistently insisting everywhere that only an immediate ceasefire was absolutely needed, and after that they would continue to relentlessly supply weapons to Ukraine. And secondly, it is important to note that both President Trump and his entire team possessed a very clear and comprehensive understanding that this particular conflict, in its very essence, truly has its underlying causes and deep-rooted origins. Furthermore, they recognize that the discourse and the talk emanating from some European presidents and prime ministers, specifically regarding how Russia purportedly launched an unprovoked and entirely unjustified attack on Ukraine, is quite frankly nothing more than childish babble. There is absolutely no other accurate or appropriate way to articulate or describe it.
This babble, there is absolutely no other way to articulate or to
Lavrov, in that clip, is saying something rather wild. He's saying Donald Trump gets the issue. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if he even believes that. But on top of getting the issue, that Donald Trump really wants to get to the root of this and deal with a deal as opposed to a ceasefire. That is a lot of confidence that Lavrov sounds like he is putting into Trump. Now, that could be him just putting this into the water, right? Because, well, the Europeans have a different tact. They're saying things that are different. Trump doesn't want to walk, even though Trump can absolutely walk. He doesn't necessarily do it. And so Lavrov, being a politician that he is, a diplomat that he is, sides with one to try to use it against the other. Well, Donald Trump, he's a diplomat. He's trying to end the war. He's trying to have sustainable peace. This is something that we agree upon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Does Lavrov believe it? Who knows? But he says it. He wants to make it material. All right. Donald Trump, Financial Times comes out and pointed out that Trump is offering security guarantees to Europe in the form of air defense and in the form of logistics and everything else. Now, question. Who is Trump lying to? Who is he lying to? You have done two things. You have talked to the Russians saying you want a sustainable peace in order to end the conflict. Okay, that comes with strings. That's not in a vacuum. That is no NATO expansion. We don't want no troops in Ukraine that are European, because what is the difference between NATO and Ukraine versus European troops being in Ukraine? There is not one. Those are big ticket items. Like, there is no deal without those things. And I would imagine that in the conversation with Putin, those things were stressed and made clear in any conversation that was had between the two sides. This is what I need to end the conflict. Period. This is what I need. I have needs. You got to tend to my needs. One of my needs, no European troops in Ukraine. No NATO expansion. And that stuff need to be real, grounded in a certain level of reality that we don't necessarily see right now at the moment, and we certainly don't see from the Europeans. And considering the Europeans are still screaming that they're going to put troops in, we have concerns. Also, Zelensky's not legal and legitimate. So no, we're not talking to him. Meaning there are things that they have said that they wanted. Yeah, and the 6 territories, by the way, or the 5, those are ours also. Heads up, just wanted you to know. Those are what we need, at the very least, for the beginnings of talks and to have a deal. Now, for Donald Trump to come out and say, had a great talk with Putin, we agreed that we need an overarching deal. Okay, so at the very least, if you don't have that, then you don't really have anything, because that was baked into any notion of a long-term ceasefire from the Russian position. So then to go to the Europeans and to be like, yeah, we'll give air cover. We're not going to put American troops in per se, but we'll give air cover, we'll give intelligence, and we'll back the Europeans who are in the coalition of the willing. However, we can pull out. Meaning, this is not real. This is not grounded in reality. I'm telling you this, but I'm also making sure you know this may not come to pass. Now, what's wild about this is, does Europe have a military capable of being put into Ukraine in that way? That's a good question, right? And on top of, do they, what will their population say when they attempt to do that? That is also an interesting question. What will their population say? Will their populations accept troops going into Ukraine, knowing full well that those troops could effectively get killed? There's that. So for Trump saying, hey, this is not set in stone, but I'm just brainstorming. Here's some things that we may be able to do. Just letting you know. Who is he lying to? Is he telling the Europeans what they want to know, like he was doing last time? Is he lying to the Russians? Which, again, as the US president, it's his war at this point. And the United States is still pushing for primacy. So any advantage that they can get, they're going to take. Who is he lying to? Fascinating question to me. Now, I think some would say, well, obviously he's lying to the Russians because, you know, they're the Russians. And Donald Trump is waging a war against the Russians in this moment. And Donald Trump wants to get any advantage that he can possibly get. And trying to bewilder the Russians may be one way to get some level of advantage if they're stupid enough to believe whatever he's peddling to the Russians. That's one thought. The other thought is Donald Trump actually wants to end the war on some terms that he defines is in his best interest, meaning he wants a face-saving mechanism in bringing the war to a close on his terms, or let's say more of an American terms that can align, whatever that means, with the Russian needs and wants, whatever that means. Meaning maybe there is some gray area that in his mind, he may be able to get if he didn't have these howler monkeys screaming at him about the war effort. So do you lie to the Europeans in order to work in quiet with the Russians to try to come to some resolution? Or this is a WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. And what you see is what you get, meaning a chaotic president that goes to the fro and really has no real clear vision on what he wants. And depending on who he talks to is how his conversation goes. You're talking to the Russians, it sounds good. So yeah, now I'm agreeing with Putin. Talk to the Europeans, hey, that sounds good. So now I'm agreeing with the Europeans. Where there is not a coherent pathway, a coherent strategy, that for all intents and purposes, Donald Trump doesn't walk because Donald Trump doesn't want to look bad. He wants to get a deal, and he doesn't want people to blame him for the failure in Ukraine. He wants a face-saving mechanism of a deal. By the same token, can do nothing in real terms to get that deal because he cannot acquiesce to Russian demands. So what you get is a war going on because of the complications built into the process. Under that model, it doesn't matter what the president wants. President can't get what he wants, like a child trying to reach a brownie. Can't get it. He doesn't have the mechanism. He doesn't have the means. He doesn't have the political charisma. He doesn't have the credibility. None of those things exist. And so he's effectively may want something. I would like a six-pack. I would like to be 20 again. I would like to have, a perfectly functioning body. I would like all those things. I'm not going to get those things. That's not the way life works. You work between the lines. It's Trump in a box. And what is it? A rat in a cage, screaming with fury, wanting to do something without the capability of doing it. Whereas what you're stuck with is Russian continuing to move. Because Trump can't do anything in real terms because of his own biases and because of the situation to which he finds himself in. It could be any of those. Each has consequences. The latter consequences are disastrous. Because what that means is that there is no conclusion to the war. What you get is a Russian military that just keeps going on and on and on, inexorably westward. And inexorably westward in a way that there is no real capability of the Ukrainian military stopping them. Europeans seem reticent to put their military in without having the United States, let's say, as a backstop in order to get involved. And if the Europeans are not going to be willing to put their weapons in, I mean, their people in, you've had like 2 or 3 militaries. You've given them every weapon system for the most part that you can think of, and they are still losing. They just continue to lose. It's a slow falling building. It's a tree that seems to defy the laws of gravity in the way that the tree collapses. But gravity is gravity, and that tree will ultimately fall. Is that what we are effectively looking at? That maybe the Europeans aren't just much of a cluster F. That maybe they're not looking at it in terms of, hey, we're going to put forces in after the fact. Maybe they are. I actually think they are that cynical. That between pulling out and between looking at the tree fall and saying that tree will collapse, and that lumberjack is going to have a hell of a time processing a tree that size. And we can take advantage of the fact that the lumberjack is going to have a hard time processing the tree that size. Meaning what Europe wants and what Trump wants may be in divergence, but in real physical matter reality terms, that divergence becomes irrelevant, because what Trump wants he can't get, and what the Europeans see happening is indeed happening. A tree is falling, and what they see happening is Russia processing that tree, and they're going to take a while to have to gobble that tree. And while they gobble that tree, they can't be gobbling for much of anything else, considering what they're going to have to expend doing so. I guess I'm trying to present a model of what could be taking place right now. If I give Trump the benefit of the doubt, which, again, habitual liars lie, so who knows? He's not going to get what he wants. Russia's going to stick with their terms. Maybe there's leeway somewhere, but Russia's going to stick with their terms. And as the situation on the battlefield gets worse, as the entirety of Donbass falls, then what? Defensive lines at that point have been demolished. Yeah, it's going to take a huge amount for Russia to occupy Ukraine. But I suppose, worst come to worst, they will do it if they have to, especially if no deal can be made. You get a slow collapse with a Russia that's going to have to take time to process a tree, marshal huge numbers of people, potentially causing some level of political instability as they do so. And if you're very cynical, sociopath, and you look at that and you think to yourself, what's better? Me losing all political credibility, us acknowledging that NATO failed on a massive effing level, us acknowledging that the Russians have won a country that effectively collapsed at one point, and the vestiges of it was enough to take us down, and that NATO is effectively defunct on some level. Yes, they can get us into a world war, but for all intents and purposes, can they fight that war and win it at the very least in conventional terms? Do you want to really admit that? Or is it easier to say, plan B, let it all collapse, let the Russians have to deal with it, and we can do whatever we want to do in the time frame that it takes the Russians to do so. And we can give money to mercenaries and smuggle weapons in and have terrorist attacks. We can do that for a while. As cynical as that sounds, does that break the model of what you see happening in real life? A model, after all, is just a model. When they're looking at atoms, electrons, positrons, antimatter, when they're looking at all of these facets of nature, don't mistake the model for the real thing. It's just a model. Like when they have me in physics class, say, this is an atom, it's circular, and it's all these things. It may be none of those things, but from the standpoint of the way that you can understand it and process it in your mind, the model works in every particular way that we can think of. And I'm saying the model that I'm providing here, as grim as it is, seems to be the model at work. Otherwise, you're stuck with this notion of why doesn't Trump walk? Right? Got to explain that. You want to end the war, he has the power to walk away. He doesn't do it. He doesn't pull out CIA. He doesn't pull out intel. He doesn't pull out weapons. He doesn't do any of that stuff. So yeah, it has to be a reason why. Is it ego? Knowing who Trump is it ego? I don't believe, by the way, that the blob in and of itself will be the thing that is the sole preventer of Donald Trump walking. I would more believe that his ego will be directly involved in that, considering I don't want people screaming at me that I lost the war. But who knows? It could be a little bit of both. I'm just pointing out, in real world, right now, he's not walking. He doesn't seem to be walking. He's given no indication of walking. There's that. Got to explain how the Europeans are in full-blown delusion, or do they know exactly what is taking place on the ground, regardless of what they say? Do you trust these people to be honest with you when they're talking about the war? Absolutely not. So if they acknowledge and understand what is taking place on the ground in the war, and yet they're still supporting Ukraine, effectively feeding every man, woman, child, grandpa, handicapped person to the Russian military, then you kind of have to ask the question, why are they doing this? It's obvious that Ukraine is getting crushed. Why are they doing this? Well, as a model, it does make sense. Logically, you're a sociopath to let more people die, maybe hundreds of thousands. If we can somehow stick to the Russians, which was the entire point of the war, and mind you, has already gotten 1.7 million people killed or missing. What's another 500,000? I'm sorry to be grim. I'm sorry to be grim. But I am painting a coherent version of reality in what's taking place. And it is coherent. Is it true? I'm not in Trump's mind. I don't know what is in his mind. I only know what he does. I'm not in the European leader's mind. Lord knows I don't want to get lost in the cobwebs of Kalis's chimp brain. But I can only look about what they're doing. And you can ask, what is the reason for what they're doing? When the reason for what they're doing doesn't entirely make sense in real scheme of things for people who are not sociopaths. So that is my take. That's my point of view. That is where I go with that. That sounds bad. I know it. I know it does. But soak it in. Soak it in. I know it sounds bad. Let's go to chat real quick while we wait for KJ. I guess Karen is not going to join us. That's unfortunate. That sucks. I really wanted to talk to her. Hopefully I didn't get the day or anything like that wrong, but we will see. I need the biggest one possible. Okay, yeah, let's get the big one. Let's get the big one. Deep penetration, as Mark would say. All right. Let's go to the first one. Benny Hill. Get rid of Barack S to chat. Thank you very much. Benny Hill, thank you for that. I do sometimes put him in timeout. That is true. Today, I wanted him to experience the shame and the condemnation of the audience as they wag the finger and throw stuff at him, effectively saying, you Nazi trash, why are you supporting this? How do you think this is okay? How do you think traumatizing kids is okay? How do you think murdering medical workers is okay? How do you think murdering journalists who are just trying to record your murdering of women and children and babies? Why do you think that's okay? Defend your position. And yeah, he could be cantankerous, but he's one person with 20 other people, 30 other people, 40 other people screaming at him that, this is scummy. Maybe some sense of reality, if he's not a asset, will come into his mind. Pink Rose, guy in suit thinks he's civilized while a baby killer. Ain't that something? I know I back the killing of babies, but I'm wearing a suit, so I'm fantastic. Yeah, dude, the suit doesn't cover that. You got blood dripping out your mouth. The suit doesn't cover it. This one is Nut 716. Thank you, Nut 716. That is very nasty, but I appreciate your donation. Thank you for that. Look, and just so y'all know, you can always support this channel. PayPal, Super Chat, Buy Me a Coffee, Super Stickers, memberships, all of those things directly benefit the channel. They demonetize many of these videos. And so your support is the thing that effectively helps this channel maintain itself. So you have my deepest appreciation for anything that you give and offer to support independent media. Thank you for it. And this one is Lab66. Important to remember, Tom Barrack is no better than Trump. Too many commentators still are self-deluded about Trump. Yeah, I don't know how they are self-deluded. I mean, how do you have a man that is effectively backing a genocide and murder and massacre of millions of human beings, not to mention starving those human beings, seeing skeletal frames of children, of babies in hospitals, with the Israeli government calling it what is the disease they call it? Cerebral palsy. They have cerebral palsy. That's what they call it, cerebral palsy. Oh, nobody's being starved. We don't shoot innocent civilians. That baby had a bomb in his diaper. That's why we put 300 bullets in him. That's why. We're the most moral military in the world. We bomb houses to let them know before we bomb houses. How about tents? How do you bomb tents? To let them know before you bomb a tent. So yes, I appreciate that. Trump backs that. That's his war also. He can't get away from that. That's on him. He supplies the weapons. He supplies the money. We have all sorts of building materials that are taking place in Gaza as we speak. That is on Trump. Agreed. Agreed. I don't know how anybody can get away with the genocide, let alone act as if the United States is not the main participant of the genocide. We are equally damaged and tarnished. But yeah, Trump is trash, no doubt. Anal Awad, I am so infuriated about about this Poly and West Asia situation. I feel so hopeless and helpless. What is right has become wrong, and what is wrong is right. It's upside down. The world we live in. Only sanity I have is voices like yours. Right and wrong hasn't changed. Right and wrong hasn't changed. Those things are the same. Like, look, I feel you. It's dark. But it's not like right and wrong has somehow become upside down. A state, as a political entity, is a group of people who've taken power. That's all. It's not reality. Reality is something different. A state superimposes a reality on the population to which they are occupying. And we all, on some level, accept that state because #, reasons, for various reasons, actually. But there is a vast difference between the behavior of a state versus what's actually right in a moral and ethical sense. We've seen it over the course of U.S. history with them going after JFK, going after Martin Luther King, going after Malcolm X, going after all of these people, and the life that these people led. These people didn't lead easy lives. It was the very act of pointing out what was right against state interests that made their lives miserable. So look, the world hasn't turned upside down. Right and wrong hasn't changed. You have a state that has gone rogue. There's a difference in those things. A state of sociopaths and psychopaths is not, let's say, the standard by which we judge what's right and what's wrong. Never forget that. State is not real. It's a legal fiction. It's a superimposed item. Yes, it has a capability of marshaling force in order to beat you and compel you and put you in a cage. That is true. None of that changes, right and wrong. Not one shred of it changes, right and wrong. It is just power. There's a difference between power and right and wrong. If you were an abused spouse and they were beating the hell out of you, it doesn't make it right just because the person was beating the hell out of you. Your husband was a sociopath or a psychopath. That is different than what is right and wrong in actual reality. And by right and wrong, I don't mean it in a ethereal sense. I look at it as granted, I'm a software engineer, but they are behaviors that lend itself to creating society, behaviors that don't lend itself to maintaining and creating a society. Oftentimes, golden rule, do unto others as you want done unto you. Yeah, it's trivial, but as one of my audience members pointed out yesterday, it is valid as a gauge in the way that you operate, especially on larger scales. Individual scales get more complicated because what's right and wrong can be somewhat difficult. But murder and the way that the government is doing it, it's just wrong. It's just sadistic, it's barbaric. They're criminals in the very sense of the term. They would not obviously want that to happen to them or anybody that they love to care about, and yet they're willing to prosecute that on other people around the globe. They're monsters. They're monsters with blood dripping out of their fangs. And so I just want you to know, Dracula's point of view of the world is not necessarily the gauge by which I would decide on what's right and what's wrong. Those are different things. Yeah, it's dark, but you deal with the fact that it's dark. You're an adult. You have to deal with it. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it is what is taking place in reality. You got to kind of confront it in order to deal with it. So agreed, it sucks. It's not like I would love to be a bundle of joy and light in covering the stories. It's just so happened that this is the topics that we cover. We did into dark, depraved, black pill-ish items. Yeah. Anal, buck up. Buck up. Yeah, there are horrible things in the world, but there are also pretty things in the world. You can dabble in one while acknowledging the other. Just being a person. But thank you for those, honestly. And thank you for your point of view. I mean, people need to hear it, right? I mean, we're here on some level to share also. That's why I take chats. Super sticker, Daniela. Is that right? Dane Hill. Is that Dane Hill? Dane Hill? Dana? Don Hill? I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. Don Hill. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. What time is it? All right, it's 6:29. I don't have time to get into another story. KJ is going to come on, and KJ is like a clock. I will see what is going on with Karen. God, I hope I didn't get this day wrong. No response. This is why I like text. Text is straightforward. Yeah, everybody has their phone with them all times, usually. So, but that being said, thank you for that. Thank you all for the chats. By the way, I have a birthday coming up. I have wanted a birthday bash. My birthday is going to be on Sunday. I have wanted to have a birthday bash show where I'm 48, and I thought 48 guests will be great. I was able to get like one. Nobody wants to do a show on Sunday. Everybody seemed down on it. And so I'm not going to push because I appreciate them joining me. I am trying to have a stellar week next week, though, with really good guests. And I'm hoping they give me a yes on it, even if I have to kind of introduce the birthday thing as a, hey, I have a birthday, man. You can't tell me no on my birthday. You can't tell me no on my birthday. So next week is also going to be a stellar week. I'm not going to out names just yet because there are several new guests that I'm trying to get on the show. You've known those guests. You've seen those guests on many other shows. Karen would have been one of those guests. Hopefully she can rejoin either later this week or next week. So yeah. I may do a show on Sunday just because it's my birthday. But we'll see. We will see. Yeah, we'll see. All right, I'll prep this just before KJ get in. So Donald Trump was talking about China and rare earth magnets or rare earth elements. Now, understand the reason that these are important is not because they're rare. You do have them all over the place. But from the standpoint of processing, China is just a juggernaut. I think it's like 90% get processed in China, some insane level. They are not optional, which is why China has the US by the balls on this very specific issue. You need these things for your military equipment. When you're using high precision equipment, you need certain materials in order to make that high precision equipment work. It's not like, okay, well, we're not getting it from China, so we're going to go to Walmart. It doesn't work that way. Trump is saying something that is completely contrary to reality here. And I often wonder, when he is saying this, what is going on in his mind? Does he know he's lying? Like, has he gotten to the point where he's evolved to such a degree where lying, it's just so natural to him that it just comes out of his ass at any particular point in any particular conversation? That's what it seems like. This is him, again, having no cards in this particular process, acting as if he has a full deck.
I could have held them back. I didn't do that because of the very strong relationship, Howard. I would say you economically with China now getting much better. They have to give us magnets. If they don't give us magnets, then we have to charge them 200% tariff or something, you know. But we're not going to have a problem, I don't think, with that. I think that's perhaps behind us. You know, China intelligently went and they sort of took a monopoly of the world's magnets. And nobody needed magnets until they convinced everybody 20 years ago, let's all do magnets. There were many other ways that the world could have gone. But so it'll take us probably a year to have them. We're heavy into the world of magnets now, only from a national security standpoint. But we have a powerful thing. It's airplane parts. They have many Boeing jets. You know, they had 200 jets that didn't fly. And I've sent them all based on his word. I sent.
Look, China doesn't have to give you anything. There's that. 2, you've gone through this notion of a trade war with China already and had to back down. 3, you require rare earths because the U.S. wants to have a military all across the globe, and it is a weak spot in regards to the U.S. ability to maintain their materials, maintain their ships, maintain their boats and airplanes and all of this other stuff. It becomes a necessity for them to have it. They have you by the balls. I know it's a difficult thing for a U.S. president to admit that. And so you need to create this fiction of, well, they got to give it to me, so it's going to be 200% tariffs. Can you imagine you go into a store and say, you must give me this, or else? Where else does that fly? And I will tell you something else. Part of the rationale for Japan going to war was because Japan was being blockaded, with the U.S. doing the blockading. They had materials that they needed. They weren't able to make those materials themselves. And so they thought that the war was a way to try to get their hands on those materials. Well, they got it massively wrong in that case because they effectively had 2 atomic bombs dropped on them ultimately. I'm trying to point out that this notion that you're supposed to be the U.S. capitalist country, the point that believes in capitalism to its core, and you are effectively threatening somebody who has a product that you want that may or may not want to give it to you for obvious reasons. What am I going to do? Give you rare earths so you can build up your military and then attack us in 10 years? Is that what I'm going to do? Is that what you think I'm going to do? No. We're a communist country with Chinese characteristics. And that may mean that we are willing to withhold a particular product because you're going to use that product for destructive means against us. We may do that. We are not the country that will sell the rope that would hang the capitalists in the way that the saying goes. So he is getting it wrong on so many levels and is acting as if I'm still big, tough man Trump. And if they don't give it to us, we're going to find a way to take it. We'll see how that works out. We will see how that works out. I will be super curious to see how that works out because I'm doubtful it's going to work out all that well. Jamal, happy pre-birthday. Thank you, man. What is this? Get a gift? I think you're trying to say get a gift. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Hung Mao. I will get a coffee. I will get a coffee. I will do that. And I will think of you as I get that coffee. Okay, what is going on? KJ, it's usually 8 o'clock. Let's see. He says, I don't know if you want to touch on Korea. Right, he was there. Okay, so he saw it. Can you send the link? There's no link. KJ, I sent. KJ, the link is in it. I swear to God, the link is in it. God damn it. I effed up. KJ, I will send you the link immediately. I am sorry. Hold on. I did send KJ a link. It just wasn't the right link. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Okay. Give me a second, guys. KJ will be right up. Okay. Give me 1 second, guys. Excellent. KJ, I effed up. I'm sorry.
Not a problem.
I looked back and saw a link because I do go back and check. And I looked back and saw a link. I was like, okay, good. KJ got his link. Then I went to the next person. Okay, she got her link. Oh, did I give her the wrong link also? Give me 1 second, KJ. I want to make sure I didn't F
problem.
this up royally. Ah, that sucks. I hope I didn't screw that up. No,
Well-
she got the right link. Okay, good. She got the right link. Welcome to the show, man. How you doing today? You doing all right, KJ?
I'm doing well. I actually did want to respond. I was listening in a little bit early. It's early in the morning for me, but I tuned in a little bit early, and I was listening in on one of your guests. And I really want to point out, because I believe this show is committed to critical thinking. The guest made a really, really big error.
You mean Dimitri?
Yes.
I think you're probably going with Dimitri. Okay, go
Yeah.
go into it. Give me your take. What's your take?
Well, let me tell you what his error is, is that he seems to think that the Genocide Convention obliges states to punish or take action against other states. And there is absolutely nothing in the Genocide Convention that actually mandates that. The first article is that says that states will punish and prevent genocide. And then it goes on to define what it means by punish. And it gives you the definition of genocide, and then it defines what you will punish. And then it gets down to the nitty-gritty about what it means to punish a state. And it makes it very clear that it is about punishing individuals. It also talks about undertaking legislation to punish individuals. It talks about having a trial for genocide. It talks about the need for extradition. And then Article 8 is where you call on the UN to take action. And Article 9 is where you request the ICJ to intermediate conflicts or interpretations, etc. And so there's absolutely nothing in the Genocide Convention that makes or obliges a state to take action against another state. The only thing that comes close is Article 8, and that requires that you go through the United Nations to take any action. So when Dimitri Lascaris or other people say, oh, they found for genocide and therefore countries need to do anything, no, you can't do that. You are violating international law. And not only are you violating international law, you're actually going against the Genocide Convention itself. Now, there is a body of international law which is about states intervening upon other states, and that is R2P, Responsibility to Protect. And that is a highly, highly problematic convention, because it's essentially the idea that Western states, it's being used for Western states to overthrow other states. So I don't know if Lascaris wants to go down the R2P area, but that is a can of worms you do not want to open. So, but all of this boils down to the fact, there are a couple of errors here. The key error, and it's a really important thing for people to understand, is people think that Israel is doing this genocide of, by, and for itself. This is not an Israeli genocide. This is a Western genocide. This is an American genocide. And Israel is simply the attack dog. The entire Western Empire is built on genocide from top to bottom. It's been a ceaseless stream of genocide, starting with the genocide in the Americas and in Africa, and then in Asia, and then post-World War II, we see the constant stream of genocide. Korea was a genocide. Vietnam, Southeast Asia was a genocide. Indonesia was a genocide. It's been one long stream of genocides. It's genocides all the fucking way down. And so when you think that Israel is acting by itself and all you need to do is constrain Israel, you've completely misread the situation. Let me give you an analogy. It's like this. You see an attack dog mauling a baby, right? And you say, why aren't you doing something? You need to stop the attack dog, right? This is terrible. And I agree. You have to stop the attack dog, or you should try. But guess what happens if you pull back and you go after that canine? What happens?
Well, they may have an owner.
The cop will shoot you.
You said the cop?
Yes.
Or the owner?
An attack dog, a police canine.
Oh, a police canine. I'm sorry.
If you get in the way of a police canine and you try and prevent it from doing what it's doing, what will happen to you? You'll get shot.
The cop is not going to be okay with their...
We've
seen it, right? Yeah.
The cop is not going to be okay. And so people who think that this is just about Israel and all you need to do is go after Israel and that'll be the end of the story, they don't understand the situation. They don't understand what's happening. They're trapped in a very narrow liberal mindset where Israel is this kind of bad apple, bad actor, and they don't understand that this is a large geopolitical maneuver that's happening on the part of empire, of which Israel is simply a subcontractor for that. So it's a bit like this, Jamal, you're playing a chess game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do you ever play public chess games?
Yes. Yeah, I played like gyms in front of
right.
A monster blitz.
Have you ever been in these games where you have some smart ass who gets behind you and says, Jamal, take their queen. The queen, you have to take that. You have to do that right away. And they give you advice, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes. And what's your response to that?
I grew up in a barbershop playing, so you just ignore those people.
You ignore them, right? Because you have your own strategy and you probably thought this out 3, 5, 10, 15 moves ahead. And you know that if you do this move, then there are an entire set of things that will happen that, may or may not go in your favor. But the guy behind you who's giving you advice usually doesn't know what the F they're talking about. And also, and this is really important, they have no fucking skin in the game.
Yeah.
If they want to play that game, they should sit down and they should get in there. And this is the problem with people who keep saying that such and such country should do this, such and such country should do this. No, you need to get your government to stop doing something. Or you need to get your government to stop abetting and aiding and facilitating genocide. That's the issue. I'm talking about Canadians. I'm talking about Germans. I'm talking about Americans. It's your government. Well, what can you do? Well, what leverage do you have over your government or the corporations that are facilitating? Think hard about it. Where is your government getting their money from?
Look, KJ, I agree with you on this. I think I even made the argument after the fact that it's a difficult thing for a country to get involved when you don't know political consequences after the fact. But let's say China does get involved. Okay, now you're in a standoff.
China is involved. Let me point out, China is already involved, right? So you have these people saying, Yemen is the only country with moral standing. Think about it. Yemen is sending missiles. Okay, where is it getting its targeting information?
China. Yeah.
From China, right? Yemen doesn't have satellites. That targeting information comes from China. Okay, Iran was lobbing missiles into Tel Aviv, right? Does Iran have Does Iran have satellites?
I think they'd have one, but I know your point. They're using Chinese satellites.
Okay, China is sending weapons to Iran, right? They're sending, at the very least, air defense systems, right?
Right.
Also, well, people say, China is doing trade. Well, every fucking country on the planet is doing trade with Israel. Okay. I think maybe one or two may have, backed out, but almost every country. And, the fact that you are doing trade, the thing is that unilateral sanctions are not allowed under international law. You have to go through the UN system in order to impose sanctions. Now, China is doing trade with Israel, and it's doing a small amount of trade. None of it is in weapons, but it's also doing trade with Russia, it's doing trade with Iran, it's doing trade with Venezuela, it's doing trade with Cuba, it's doing trade with all the countries that are fighting the empire. Okay, so if you take that in the balance and you look at, where is the advantage, where is the disadvantage, I think the advantage accrues to the global South.
Yeah.
If you think about what are one of the key exports that Israel is involved in, what does Israel export? Well, one of its key exports is diamonds, right? It controls the diamond industry. That industry is being wiped out by China. China is destroying Israel's diamond industry. And that is billions of dollars that will not go into the Israeli war machine. Okay. So there are things that are happening, there are moves that are happening, but it's like the people who don't understand the game who are just taking a glance at the chessboard and they're saying, you need to do this, Jamal. Jamal, you need to move your queen here and blah, blah, blah. They're people who don't know what they're talking about. And especially, somebody like, I have criticized lawyers in many different ways for many reasons, but essentially, lawyers are storytellers. Okay, they're not. When you go to law school, what do? You do case studies. Okay,
right.
What is a case study? It's storytelling. It's a fancy academic word for storytelling. You look at a story and then you analyze the story. That's what you're doing. So lawyers are storytellers. Of course, there's some aspect of law which has to do with code. So it's like, coding, except that there is always interpretation involved with code, right? And then the other thing you do as a lawyer is you look for precedent, which is to say that you're looking at common law, you're looking at cases before you, you're looking at other stories, and then you're trying to say that this story is like the story that came before it. It's a kind of analogical thinking. It's not logical thinking, it's analogical thinking. So you're constantly making analogies and doing this kind of analogical thinking, which is why Lascaris seems to think that, the Genocide Convention requires states to intervene, but it doesn't. There's nothing in the Genocide Convention that requires states to take action against other states. It requires states to pass legislation inside their own country and to punish individuals. Let me highlight that. It requires states to punish individuals, not states. It requires legislation inside their own country. And anything other than that has to go through the UN. Okay. So it's a complete misreading, but you can see how, that this is being misinterpreted. But I don't want to go ad hominem on this, but Lascaris, is a corporate lawyer. He worked on Wall Street. And that isn't to say that you can't have a conversion. I mean, I know John Kiriakou, he used to be CIA, okay, but he denounced the CIA. But you don't see Lascaris denouncing, Goldman Sachs, for whom he, represented. He actually brags about. He has his own website where he said he represented Goldman Sachs. He says he was the fiercest legal advocate for shareholder rights. So essentially, we're getting a corporate capitalist Wall Street lawyer telling the global South what to do in a chess game that they have nothing, that they have no stake in. My argument is that if you want to play that game, you need to put something down. Solidarity means running the same risks, or at least putting something down. So, if you have, if you are paying taxes in Canada, then you need to think about where your taxes are going to. You need to think about what are the concrete actions that I can take to prevent my country, which is a direct participant and supporter of this genocide, from actually taking action. What can I do to obstruct that? Rather than saying third parties, countries that I have no influence over whose strategy I have no understanding of what they're doing, and just having this kind of emotional, outburst. I mean, they like to do this. I mean, there's an entire section of the internet where you have people, there's this Dutch psychologist who does this too. And they just have these breast beating, shriek fests. And I'm sure they feel better after it, but it doesn't make any difference. You need to do what is effective, and that requires taking real action, not demanding others take action.
KJ, I accept it. I do accept your take. And I understand your point. You've made it eloquently well. So just saying, I want to nail that down first. Your take is apt. Your take is valid. Dmitri may have been a corporate lawyer, fair enough, but he's not coming from a bad place. You may think that what he's saying is off.
He needs to denounce. He needs to denounce those fucking corporations that have made him very wealthy and that he served for decades.
To be clear, I don't know anything about his wealth. I do know that he has put skin in the game and has risked his life doing news and media and going to Lebanon and many of these places where they nearly got killed in bombings by Israel.
Okay. So he's doing a Jimmy Carter, right? He's doing a Jimmy Carter, right? So, but look, like if you're working at Sullivan and Cromwell, Wall Street law firm, if you're working for Goldman Sachs, if you're doing the IP of Allstate Insurance Company, if you're working for Siskins LLP, if you're working for the corporate fascists, the corporate overlord class, then you need to actually disavow that rather than, brag that you were the fiercest advocate for shareholder rights, for the capitalist class.
I get that. I mean, look, I don't know. I got to be honest with you. I don't know anything about Dimitri's previous history. I don't know his income
It's
status.
all up on his website. Yes, it's on his website. It's public knowledge. Yes.
People who do a job and who do that job well are going to feel some kind of way about doing that job. So I can't blame him for that. I can only go by what Dmitri is today and what he is now. He's not coming from a bad place. Look, I understand the defense of China in this, and I understand the defense of throwing it back on the person who was effectively putting it out. Fair enough. Dmitri has been one of the most aggressive critics and advocates for the Palestinian cause that you would find on the internet, even going so far as putting his body on the line in Lebanon and these areas.
I won't say that, but here's my piece. The analysis is wrong.
Fair enough. And you can say the analysis is wrong.
Because
China is doing more.
He thinks it's about Israel. It's not about Israel. It's about the empire.
I get that. But what he sees and what everybody sees is that, yes, the U.S. is behind the empire, but it's Israel pulling the trigger. And what they want is for Israel to stop. And whereas his analysis may be wrong, it's not, again, coming from a bad place. He's looking at the world and saying, how is the world okay with this? Even though you are correct that Western governments are the main sponsors of this, support this, back this. And even now, when they're just kind of turning their heads saying, hey, we don't like this. This kind of looks bad. Okay, but they still support it. Right? It's like they're saying that just because they have to deal with the political reality of what's taking place in their territories. When you look at the world and you look at previous wars and you think to yourself, if this is a genocide and Germany was doing a genocide, if I'm a German citizen, for example, my government has gone rogue. Meaning whatever my thoughts are about what the German government is doing, the preponderance of the architecture of that government has been taken over by sociopaths and maniacs and have decided to use the mechanisms of state to go murder a lot of people. My tax dollars are involved. My wants are not listened to. There may be 5 of us. We are not listened to. What do you do when a rogue state has gone rogue? And that's the dilemma that people in the West are stuck with. What do you do when a rogue state has gone rogue? When you have no capability of affecting that state.
You do what is possible, Jamal. Think deeply. What is possible? Where are the pressure points? Where are the ways that there can be real leverage? Because we are not yet in fascist Germany, right? And even in fascist Germany, there were Germans who resisted.
Yes.
There were Germans who resisted.
And they didn't matter. And they ultimately didn't matter.
They didn't matter, but they tried. And if enough of them had tried, it could have made a difference. But right now, we cannot fall back on impotence and say, there's nothing for us to do. You have to ask very clearly and specifically, what can be done?
KJ,
where is the funding coming from? Jamal, where is the funding coming from?
They are making dollars out of thin air.
It's also coming from taxes, right?
They're making money out of thin air. When we're at $37 trillion in debt. That wasn't money that came out of taxes. That was money that they conjured.
Jamal, it's actually 137. It's $137 trillion because they're pulling a little accounting trick. They're using cash accounting when they should be using accrual accounting. If you do accrual accounting, it's actually over $130 trillion.
So you're making my point. That wasn't tax dollars that made $137 trillion, whatever that number is.
Yes.
I'm saying when Putin made that speech, Putin made a speech one day that I thought was profound, that nobody picked up, nobody covered, where he said the United States conjured $10 trillion out of thin air and went to war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he said, if you could do that, and every other country in the world can't do that because they can effectively leverage the fact that they're the reserve currency, then what does that mean for war? Like at that point, you can have private wars that the rest of the world effectively finances because you are effectively making money out of thin air. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Jamal, it works up to a point and then it breaks down, right? And that's why Trump is trying to put on these tariffs. That's why Trump is trying to shake down countries for every last cent that they have. So there are people who think in terms of like a kind of pure MMT type of a theory. They think, oh, money is just something, it's just a convention. We conjure it out of thin air. Much, much more complicated than that. If it were that easy, then the government wouldn't need to tax you. They'd keep you happy and they wouldn't tax you. They wouldn't be sanctioning and they wouldn't be levying tariffs. The thing is that even a debt is a promissory note of future labor. That there's there's labor that is going to have to be done in the future. Now, at the current moment, that debt is unsustainable and unpayable. But, and the only way they're going to get away with not paying it is more violence, right?
Yes.
More violence. But in the meantime, the circuit of money needs to keep moving. Money has four functions, right? It's a unit of credit. It's a unit of account. It's a unit of exchange, and then it's also a medium of exchange. It has all of these different functions, and people tend to confuse these different functions, and they think, oh, we just conjure it out of thin air. If that were the case, the United States would not need to be belligerent and bullying to other countries. It's only to the extent that other countries accept US dollars and that the US has the legal and political and military force to enforce it that it can do those things.
Agreed.
But that force is waning. And in the meantime, the US still relies on taxes, right? So your taxes are funding the war machine. So relies on taxes, right? So your taxes are funding the war machine. So to that extent, then you can ask yourself, where do I have leverage? What are the different ways that I have leverage over this war machine? It's a question that everybody should ask themselves. There are different ways and different means. Everybody is a different individual. But you have to ask this question. Where are the pressure points on the governments, our governments, Western governments, Canadian governments, German governments, American governments that are actually funding and enabling the genocide? That's where you have to start to look. Not you don't look under the lamppost just because it's brighter. You look under the lamppost where you lost the key, right? That's where you have to go. And so it's easy. Let's get away from these kind of easy solutions, these easy catharses, and look at the really hard work that needs to be done, including the hard critical thinking. The hard critical thinking means you don't wave the Genocide Convention around and say that it's going to do something that it doesn't. It doesn't. That's a fault in international law, but you can't wave the Genocide Convention and pretend that it's something that it's not.
Fair enough. I accept that. I do accept that.
Uh-huh.
I'm just pointing out that, look, I get it, right? He's going after China, saying he doesn't understand why China is not doing this. And there are a lot of people who've made that argument. I think you and I have had that conversation itself.
Yeah.
And you fleshed out all of the things that China was actually doing.
Yes.
In these kind of subversive ways, in ways that other countries weren't touching, weren't doing at all. And China's been this kind of advocate about this particular process. I accept that. I think
so.
Right.
We can move inside the constraints of the law, or we can move into kinetic action. But let me ask you, Jamal, do you think there's anything short of military intervention that can stop the empire at this point? Remember, it's not just Israel, it's the empire.
Yeah, but the immediate fire is in Gaza.
Sorry?
I get your point. The immediate fire.
I agree. I agree.
What Daniel,
so we need to put it out. We need to put out the fuel. We need to put out the fuel that is.
KJ, it sounds like you're saying you shouldn't pay your taxes, which means people are going to go to jail. And you can say that's a protest, but individual protests don't matter.
No, I think it's a choice that everybody. I'm not saying that you should do this, that, or the other. But I think it's an analysis that each person has to make, and they have to decide what is the most effective way. What is the most effective way to prevent the genocide?
Only collective action. Individual action doesn't matter.
So it requires collective action. So then we have to ask what kind of collective action and where?
Well, there have been people who have thrown their bodies and have been beaten and put in a cage for it. This is kind of what I'm saying. You may say we're not at the point of Nazi Germany yet. Fair enough. But, you know, when 2% or when the opinion of the American public matters 0.0% or 0.1%, then you have a problem with the political space. The political space has gotten so much of a tin ear that it doesn't care. Now, you can say people could go blow stuff up. You can say people should start shooting Congress members. You can say all that. But is that really going to change fundamentals on the ground when the U.S. is fundamentally invested in this idea of having its own aircraft carrier in the Middle East that it is sucked itself to in this way that this is a necessary thing for U.S. hegemony in this particular part of the globe? How do you stop the empire? And does individual action stop an empire? I'm very skeptical that individual action stops an empire.
So my answer to that is you do what you can, and you have the deepest, most thorough analysis possible, but you do not say that somebody else should do something. That's not helpful. I don't think that gets us anywhere.
Fair enough. I accept that. Again, I told you you're right. I agree with you. I don't think that you're wrong. I'm just saying I have a softer view of Dmitri. And from my point of view, it's not coming from necessarily a bad place. He is in a place that many people are, of something needs to be done. These people are being murdered. You can make the case that there's genocides that have been taking place all over the world. I accept that. This one is happening now.
I keep finding myself psychologizing a little bit, which I don't like. But I think there's a way in which people in the global north, in the West, feel this need to blame somebody else because they know in their heart of hearts that it's their government that is directly responsible, and therefore they want to blame somebody else for it.
Dimitri's not blaming. He's not blaming.
I'm not saying Dimitri's doing that. I'm not saying Dimitri's doing that, but I'm saying that there are people that I have seen that just, they are part of the war machine. I was with a group of veterans for a while, and these are people who are veterans. They were not drafted into the military. They chose to go into military. They were part of the war machine. And now they're saying, well, such and such country needs to do something. Okay, that's fine. But what about your piece of it? What about your responsibility? I don't think we get anywhere if we try and offload responsibilities to other parties. The perpetrator does not get to shriek at the bystander while they are committing the rape, right?
Right.
You can't say, you must stop me. Everybody stop me. It's like Barack Obama saying, make me do something. No, it's your job, Obama, to do something. It's not. You remember that thing where he said, make me do it. You have to make me.
Jeff, what is it? What is his name? Roosevelt. Also,
yes,
apparently.
exactly.
That's very different. Exactly.
So why you've been elected to stop the war, Obama? Obama was elected because people didn't like the Bush wars, and then he continued it anyway, right?
Right.
And for him to say, make me do it, that's a evasion of responsibility. And there's this constant evasion of responsibility. I think if people sat down and they thought really hard about who was responsible, I think that you would have an entirely different tack and an entirely different level of commitment. As I said, solidarity means running the same risks, or maybe not the same risks, but putting something down, put some skin in the game, right? As I said, it's like that chess player, somebody telling you what to do over your chess moves. No, you play the game. You put something down on it. I think that's what's missing.
Fair enough. I think I can't speak for everybody, but I think many people in the global north, if we want to call it the US, that or Canada, that have the sense that there is a loss of control in regards to the government space. That one of my audience members, they were like, "Guy, it feels like the world is turned upside down and right is wrong and wrong is right." And I was like, "No, it's not. You just have a bunch of sociopaths who run in the government who have created an overlay of reality that we are all functioning in. It's not the same thing as reality per se. But I can't speak for everybody. It's not an offloading. It's a desperation. It's a scream of desperation. It's a almost, in weird ways, a cry for help in a strange way. Because you're right, the genocide and whatnot is being committed, but it's almost like saying, I've lost control of my husband. Please stop him. It's that. And I get it. From your point of view, you're saying, well, that's like the rapist saying, well, she had a short dress, so she deserved it. I understand the point. Like, it's not for her to wear a long dress, so you don't commit rape. Just like it's not for the U.S. and people in the U.S. to say, hey, somebody else needs to help and stop our government because our government has gone mad. But what if we're right? Our government has gone mad. It's separate. And I get your point. Collective action, individual action, you do what you can as an individual to try to change the situation in the context. You put skin in the game in regards to risks. Martin Luther King put his life on the line constantly in regards to the risks that he was willing to take. What is his name? The other Congress member got beaten on a bridge in order to create the larger phenomena of, oh my God, that's outrageous, where you can shock the conscience of a nation by effectively putting your life on the line. I get it. I do get it. I do get it. I'm only trying to point out it is not coming from a bad place. Some people may take it to a bad place and blaming China. Fair enough. Those people are wrong. And those people, I would wager to you, don't know what you just told me in this particular interview. So fair enough. You are right.
They also don't know about the rare earth elements, which are essentially depleting the U.S. arsenal.
Yeah.
That's a really big deal. Okay. But the thing is, Jamal, I don't think it's helpful for people to tap into the belief that they have no agency, right? Because once again, this is the ideology of the oppressor. They want you to believe that you can't do anything. They want you to believe that you have no agency. They want you to scream and shriek and blame others and ask others. And they want you to blame, Russia or China for the genocide, when they know deep inside that they're the ones that are committing, they're the ones perpetrating it. So right. I think that you shouldn't go down this road where you say, oh, there's nothing we can do. We have no agency. There are 1,000 times during the day when you probably say that to yourself, when you say, I have no agency, when actually you do. It's just that you haven't explored it. Okay. And there is something that you can do. And if you start to explore that tiny, crevice becomes bigger and bigger. And then you can see that there's more types of agency. And then the key thing is to understand is that you shouldn't act by yourself. You have to act with other people. You have to
right.
collectively. But once again, that again is the ideology of the oppressor. The oppressor wants you to think of yourself as an individual and only as an individual. And there you're already trapped. So you have two things going on. One is this ideology of the individual, which thinks that you can only function or act by yourself. And then the second part, and the two go exactly together, is the belief that you have no agency. Because this is true. If you only try and act as an individual, you won't make a difference, right? Your vote doesn't make a difference. Your actions don't make a difference. But if you kind of open the scope a little bit and think about what can I do collectively, then you can start to make a difference. And that's very, very different from, just kind of screaming and having a bawling fit. Fine, have that. Have your catharsis, okay? But after you've done that, start to organize. That's the key piece which is missing. Have a critical analysis, understand the situation, and then start to organize and take action collectively. There's so many things that could be done. I mean, think about all these tech companies that are providing the data and the AI and the targeting for the genocide, right? I mean, all of these are American companies. There are actions that can be taken, and and they're much, much more effective than just kind of shrieking into the void.
Fair enough. I do get it. Like I said, I do get it. I agree with you. I don't disagree. Trust me, if I did, I would say so. I understand your point. And you did and gave a fantastic breakdown of what China is doing to push back on the critics that claim they should be doing more. And I think I was talking to another guy, so it feels weird, like making that argument, like somebody else should get involved with something that your government is effectively doing. Your government is committing a genocide. It's like somebody else needs to help. I do get it. I do get it.
And also, I will concede, I understand the urgency because we are seeing a genocide. So, whatever is being done is not enough. Certainly it's not enough. More needs to be done. And everybody needs to do more. But, people who think that it's just about third parties, third countries having to do something when there is no legal, there's no legal foundation for them to do that short of waging war. If you think that it's about waging war, then we're running into an entire different set of trolley problems. Essentially, we're looking at the ultimate trolley problem, which is that we're going to face nuclear war. Remember, this is a genocide being enacted by two nuclear powers. Israel is a nuclear power. The U.S. is a nuclear power.
Right. I don't think they were talking about war. I think anybody I've ever heard talked about in the sense of gas being cut off, for example, from Turkey, resources being cut off from China, resources being cut off. Basically, countries having a trade embargo in the way they had with apartheid South Africa.
Yes, but Israel is not South Africa. South Africa was isolated. And by doing a trade embargo on South Africa, you could effectively bring the country down. Yeah. To do a trade embargo on Israel really means to do a trade embargo on the United States. Yeah. Right? That's what you need. It's much, much bigger. Israel is not an isolated South Africa. It is essentially the attack dog of the United States. And unless you understand that, you're going to have a completely misguided analysis. It's like, why don't you just, cut the tail off the dog? The tail is wagging the dog. No, because if you cut the tail off the dog
will bite.
The dog will bite you.
The dog bites. KJ, this has been a fantastic breakdown. This wasn't anywhere near where it was going to go, but I appreciate your passion on this because you gave a fantastic breakdown of what China is doing. And you put it in a package in a way that, because, it was interesting. I think I had you on the show once and I said, China seems to be Armageddon. or not arming, but giving them targeting data in order to hit their targets. And it's like they were doing sheepishly, like, we're not really going to admit this, but just know we're here. So you're right. They are involved in this stuff in more ways, in more of a subversive way. No, you're right. Agreed. And I appreciate the breakdown.
Jamal, it is really, really unsatisfying because we're facing a genocide right in front of our eyes. We're seeing it every single day. And whatever is being done is not enough. But I want to throw it really back on the people who say that they're concerned about the genocide. What is it that you can do both individually and collectively from inside the belly of the beast that could actually make a difference? Ask that question over and over again. And as you start to ask that question, different possibilities will arise. And I assure you, they're much, much more effective than shrieking and saying third parties should do something.
KJ, you're fantastic. You're fantastic. I disagree with you on Dmitri. I greatly disagree with you on Dmitri. But I understand your take and I understand where you're coming from with it. Thank you for this. Honestly, fantastic breakdown. It's a necessary thing because the question gets asked a lot. And to have a video where it's packaged to explain this is what China is doing is a beneficial thing to the ecosystem that we inhabit. So thank you for this, man. I appreciate it. KJ, no. Oh, you came in hot, KJ. I don't think I even gave you an introduction. Fair enough. I like you fired up, dropping F-bombs. Usually you're far more moderated. It's like, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I love it. KJ, no. He is, where is it? He is, there it is, specialist in geopolitics of the Asia Pacific region. He is contributor to the book, Capitalism on a Ventilator, once censored by Amazon. It is now available at iacenter.org. You can also find KJ on Breakthrough News Network under the China Report. I'm going to actually look that up today, KJ. I've tried a new leaf of writing down questions for my guests and having a title already set because it's taking too much time to try to process these videos. This one is pretty straightforward. KJ, thank you for this. You be safe, okay?
Thank you.
Have a good one. Thank you. All right. KJ came in hot. I like it. I like it. I like it a lot. And the video writes itself. So there's even that. And he's right. Like, look, if you're China, militarily, there's no solution. I mean, you can try to attack Israel, but again, you're dealing with two nuclear powers, so you're dealing with a standoff. So anything that you do has to be subversive. It feels unsatisfying. And I think that's where people get their ire from. But no, KJ is right. What is this? There we are. CDC is not looking after potential foodborne illnesses. It is now not required, that's right, for a pathogen in states, what does this say? In states, Campylobacter. I don't know what that word is. Listeria. Oh, these are different viruses. Listeria and 3 others to try to cover this story, if you could. So yes, MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, has made the choice that certain, let's say, pathogens don't necessarily need to be covered. I saw this story a while ago. I didn't have a guess to kind of hit the story. That's gross. Obviously, that's not making anybody healthier. There's that, right? So, Fanta, I will try to find a guest on that. Oh, my pen is dying on me. Live, pen, live. I just need 2 minutes. I will try to find a guest on that. If I can find a guest on that, I'll do that story. Because you're right, it's gross. It's just gross. There's no rationale for it. The idea that Trump is giving himself a massive tax cut while simultaneously saying we need to pull back government resources is outrageous, right? Jamal, here we are. Wait a minute. Missing one. Okay. Jamal, your president claims, my president, your president too, Sparky. Your president claims to want peace. Why doesn't he end the longest war the U.S. has been in 6 countries and prosecute to this day the U.S. war on small business? Oh, that's the good one, right? Do you remember when Trump was putting out his quote unquote big beautiful bill, and one of the people that was on the network said this is an attack on big business, on small business? Jamal, the president, let me make sure I got this right. Your president claims he wants peace. Why doesn't he end the longest war the United States has been and continues to be to prosecute to this day, the U.S. war on small business? Sparky, good question. From your mouth to God's ears, right? From your mouth to God's ears. Jamal, happy birthday. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Ghetto gift. I appreciate that. Dan Hell, super sticker. Thank you, Dan Hell. I'm so infuriated about the poll and West Asia situation. I feel so hopeless and helpless. What is right has become wrong, and what is wrong has become right. Upside down world we live in. Only sanity I have is shows like yours. For one, I thank you for that. If any contribution that I can give, I suppose this is a small one. A sense of reality and trying to be the integrity despite being flawed. There's being flawed and there's being genocidal, right? Those are two radically different things. But I think KJ spoke to this. I don't know if KJ saw this tweet, but he spoke to it. He hit it on the head. This idea of you're not helpless. I guess I think back to the civil rights movement in that sense. Freedom is not free. It's paid in blood. And it is a difficult thing to say because it just so happens to be true. Beseeching doesn't work. Nobody cares about your beseeching. If you're in a relationship with a guy and you bitch and moan at him, and he knows that the most you're going to do is bitch and moan, he's not changing. He doesn't care about your bitching and moaning. It takes you to leave at some point, call his bluff, to do something different. And I guess in a collective way, that needs to take place. But Lord knows that is a difficult thing to contemplate in regards to figure out how to make that work. There are talented people, but we're so disparate around the world, around the country. Important to remember, Tom Barrack is no better than Trump. No, he is not. Too many commentators still are self-deluded about Trump. I don't know why they are. Nut 716, thank you, Nut 716. Deeply appreciated. Pink Rose. Guy in a suit thinks he's civilized while killing babies. Ain't that something? Get rid of Barrett in the chat. Thank you. Well, as I said, I wanted Barrett to sit there and listen to the cognitive bashing that was taking place. Even if I think he's an asset and he's here, paid to be here, still, I want him to listen to the cognitive bashing that's taking place by the audience and by myself. He probably never hears it on any other location. He probably is with his Zionist friends talking about the babies that they ate and perfectly content in eating other babies. It's here where he gets the thrashing. I'm okay with that, what I'm actually pounding in that case. Happy birthday. I think we did that one. Oh, this is a different one. Happy birthday and thanks for the debates. I don't think it was a debate. I mean, yeah, I don't think it was a debate. I'll come back to that one. Sparky, the United States and its minions are so bloodthirsty that they use arguably fake countries, Ukraine and Israel, as their proxies for mega slaughter. Yeah, I mean, all countries are legal fictions, but I know your point. Yeah, I get your point. I mean, they were stupid enough to do it, especially from the standpoint of Ukraine. Israel, if they attack Iran, they're going to get smashed. And I will have some damn good coffee from Indonesia to be like, that coffee is hot. That coffee is hot. That coffee is real hot. I want some hot coffee. I'm conflicted because I try to be a decent human being. I I don't want a war. I don't want a war. Intellectually, deep down, I want that regime smashed. Being honest. Fei Lu, it's your birthday. Happy birthday, Fei Lu. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Ebony Knights, happy birthday. Whoa. Ebony Knights. Thank you. Wow. Thank you. I don't know what to say. Thank you. Just thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm stunned by that. Thank you, Ebony Knights. Honestly. Natalie, I didn't think it was a debate per se. I'm going to defend my guests. All of my guests. Unless they go rogue. Like Ritter went rogue. People are who they are. And they come to this in the way they come to this. You have somebody like Colonel Wilkerson, for example, who was around at the time where they were screwing over Haiti. He's been sheep dipped and has seen the light. I accept that. Gotta have to accept it. If Dmitri was a corporate lawyer prior, I don't need him to do Hail Marys and walk around condemning whatever the company is constantly. The fact that he was willing to put his body on the line to go into Lebanon and many of those places, I mean, for God's sake, they were bombing areas that were near where they were. That means something. That's not trivial. That's putting skin in the game, in the way that KJ talked about, in order to get to some level of truth and see it with your own eyes and be able to report that truth. That's not nothing. That is something. Social media wouldn't be what it is, meaning viral. And news. News is a weapon. It's the reason why they got rid of Sputnik. It's the reason why they go after channels for shadow banning and everything else. They do it because they realize the ability to distribute information is viral. And what you distribute matters in the way that people accept that information. It's your pushback against the nonsense that they often put on mainstream media. That matters. That's not nothing. So I get where KJ is coming from. I agree with him, 99%. But I don't think it's not nothing for people who put their face out. And yeah, maybe I'm defending myself on this, I suppose. But I'll do it. The idea that people put their face out, it's not an AI generated thing. It's them. They're exposing themselves in a raw sense. Dealing with people like Barack, dealing with randos who attack you, dealing with media that comes after you, calling you Russian agent, all this other stuff. And yet you do it. And you do it day in, day out, day in, day out. You don't do it because it pays well. Because it doesn't. I mean, you effectively dance for dollars. Except, I mean, I hope you get my point. It's not like you're making $130,000 at a radio station or whatever that number is. You do it because it digs in you. It bugs you. It pisses you off. There's an energy behind it because it is something that aggravates you, where you want to explain reality and have a defense of reality in the way that you try to define it and understand it. That matters. Otherwise, they wouldn't have money into the BBC or any rando news network that tells you nonsense in order to try to entrench your mind into the point of view state. The fact of being able to put yourself out there matters. It does. So, from my point of view, that is doing something. If there needs to be more of setting myself on fire in front of the White House, that's dramatic, but it's not going to change anything. KJ is right. Collective action is what's required. It's hard because it's collective, as opposed to state, where there are far fewer people with more powers at their disposal. But that doesn't mean you're defenseless. And fact of the matter is, if you were living during slavery, or living during the civil rights movement, or living during any of these time frames, all of that stuff seemed impossible until it happened. So again, KJ's not wrong. What is this? Frank Frio. Is a country-wide work stoppage possible? I think that would put it. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I think they will put it in a way because douche. What does that say? Douche tube censorship. Is a country-wide work stoppage possible? I had to put it that way because douche tube censorship. That's a good question. I don't know. People would have to agree. People would have to agree. And of course, the issue with that is I have to be honest with you, I'm very cynical about this. If I have a wife and a kid, a mortgage, a car note, I have bills, am I going to do that? Let's say I deeply care about the issue. Am I going to do that? I don't know. Depends on how much they care and whether or not they're willing to sacrifice what they have in defense of somebody else. I don't know. I don't know, Frank. I'm the wrong person to ask that. You need somebody more hopeful to ask that question to. I think systems go until they can't. That's what I think. I think this continues until the U.S. collapses. That's what I think. And I think the U.S. will collapse on its own contradictions. Something that can't keep going eventually doesn't. And you have a system that is effectively allowed an immiseration of the working class and the poor, while simultaneously allowing that poor and working class seeing you cut resources, cut SNAP benefits, cut healthcare, while giving yourself massive amounts of money and cash with no recognition at all that everybody else exists. How long can that go on? How long can that operate? At some point, that will crack. Reality will assert itself. I'm a firm believer in that. How long that takes, I don't know. I just hope or pray that we don't end up in a global war. In the meantime, this empire needs to collapse. The sooner it does, the better off the world would be. That may be controversial. Fuck it. That's my point of view. We're supporting a genocide. We're trying to start another conflict on the Caucasus. We are pushing Ukraine, and it's gotten 1.7 million people killed in that war just because of geopolitical concerns and geopolitical reasons. Trump is still carrying that war on right now as we speak. We overthrew the government in Syria, or the very least helped do it over the course of several years, with them murdering Alawites, Christians, Druze, etc. This is a fire. We're doing something similar in Lebanon, where we are, again, trying to murder women and children and try to overthrow, or at the very least destroy the state. You've already taken the state politically. Like, you can go to one part of the world after the next, bombing in Somalia, the terrorists that we pay to go after some of the governments that we don't particularly like. How is this a positive thing? This is not living light. This is chaos. And it will have repercussions. At least one would hope. One would hope. All right. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. I want to thank all of you that donated. You guys help support the show. The show cannot operate without your donations. Yes, it sucks for me to say it, but it's just kind of part of the job. You can support through PayPal, Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, Super Chat, stickers, memberships. All of those things are deeply beneficial and supportive. All of the information is below the video if you are interested. Also share it, like it. Those are also beneficial. You have my appreciation for even doing that. So I'm going to call it a day, or it's night for me. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. You guys stay awesome. See you tomorrow. Same time, same place. Be kind to the degree